Hey folks, welcome to the Rowan Ridge Farm stream. This is usually the Friday night farm stream. Tonight it is a Saturday night that we're doing this on because last night stuff happened as life normally does, and so wasn't able to get the live stream going as we normally have it. But our mission here is to make America farmers again and to help you participate in that process because farming is literally the backbone of American culture. And as you probably know, if you've been not living under a tree stump somewhere, we need all the help we can get in rebuilding and remodeling that and reawakening that. And I'm happy to share what I am doing and chat with those of you who are out there doing similar things in your part of the world. But I also have been feeling strongly that it's important to keep in mind that even people who are not growing animals or growing crops or growing vegetables to eat are still an integral part of the food system and that supply chain that we want to try to encourage you guys, and that we're trying to, certainly, and I know you guys are as well, that we're trying to take ownership of that supply chain, that the people who are buying directly from farmers are every bit as much a part of this process as the farmers who are raising the crops. I mean, it's a different animal, certainly, but I want to try to cast a wide net to everybody who is involved and encourage you to participate and be part of what we're doing here. And I'm Stephen Reichert, if we haven't met. And if you don't know who I am, then you might be on the wrong live stream, but let's get into it. Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit to you guys about the World War III farming approach and kind of not to go over too much of what's in the news because, as Chris already mentioned, I think everybody kind of has some level of fatigue with everything that is going on in the news, between what's happening in Iran and the political stuff, obviously the fallout from the war that is currently being called a conflict or military action. I don't know. There's a lot of different semantic games that the powers that be like to play surrounding the terminology that we're using. And I'll take a quick detour before we get into the farming side of things, because I took a little deviation from the normal content that I am creating. And the majority of what I'm trying to create around here on this channel is relating to farming and the homesteading. But I think it's important for farmers and homesteaders and peasants like us to put our oar in the water and talk about political things when the situation merits it. And while I'm not Tim Pool, I'm not Tucker Carlson, I'm certainly not Cenk Uygur, thank God, by any stretch of the imagination, but I am a person who is affected by what is going on. And I kind of got fed up with a lot of the stuff I was seeing on Facebook. I'm pretty quiet on Facebook farm-wise. I don't post a ton of stuff over there. It's more just to have the platform open so that I can get messages and also to stay in touch with people that I know locally, friends that I've made over the years, that kind of thing. And just seeing a lot of, and of course, the Facebook algorithm is particularly insidious because it always throws stuff at you that it's like trying to needle you and piss you off and get engagement farming, I would call that. Um, it just turned into too much. But seeing, it's not so much the stuff that I'm seeing the news media and the different sites that Facebook puts out there and throws in front of my face in order to try to engagement farm. It's seeing the reaction from people that I know and love, that I care about, who have gone, in my opinion, kind of off the deep end with the political takes. And I'm always happy to have respectful disagreements with people, but I know that, as I said in the video that I made, and I linked that down in the description to this live stream, so anybody who is watching this and, wants to go beyond the little summary that I'm giving here now out of pocket of that video that I made, I just kind of wanted to vent a little bit about the impacts of this war on what I'm trying to do with food production and this farm, and how I'm already starting to see some of the changes some of the stresses that are all trickling down real quick onto the farmers, because in a lot of ways I think farmers and small business owners in general, the working class, we're like the canaries in the coal mine. And so whenever there's trouble elsewhere in the world and in the economy, all of that tends to trickle down quickly and have the evidence borne out in the day-to-day lives of the people that are trying to make things and sell things and distribute things, because ultimately we feel a lot of those impacts a little bit before some of the bigger businesses and some of the bigger bigger businesses, let's just say, because a lot of bigger businesses that have inventory that is backlogged and kind of stacked up from a long time back, their prices are still dealing with the cost that was current when they put all that stuff in the freezer or they put it all in the warehouse, depending on what they're shipping. But for me, everything, with smaller businesses, there's a faster turnaround time, and so the impacts are much more immediate. And my point is not necessarily to turn this into a political treatise, but I've just been really disappointed with the way that Trump has handled things. And I made the mistake of, not really a mistake, but I put that out there because I kind of invite some commentary and curious to see if I would get any pushback. For the most part, I didn't get a lot of pushback on the videos talking about that. A handful of people complaining and saying that, like, oh, what took you so long, type of thing. And I want to clarify that my perspective on the things that Trump campaigned on, I liked what he campaigned on, which is why I voted for the guy, because I figured at least some of those policies, if he actually is able to implement them, they're going to be beneficial for me, because what I want is not really to have any kind of hope in a political system or a politician, but rather to maybe have a politician who's going to put people in the administration that are going to cut things, regulations, and kind of deviate from what the lobbyists would normally do. I know this is, listening to myself say these things, I'm like, man, why did I think that was actually going to happen? That's just completely nonsense. But to be able to cut some of the strings from the manipulation of like the corporate overlords and the lobbying groups and all that stuff, and rather than getting that, we got, war. And not a small war like the Maduro thing in Venezuela. It was just kind of like, okay, I mean, maybe he got that out of his system, and I was like, okay, now we can get back to just doing normal things and get back to trying to expand the economy, improve things for the working class, reduce energy costs. Oh, wait, there's more. Now we're going into Iran, and we're going to start a fight that doesn't have any clear endpoint. There's no vision that's been articulated that I have heard that says, under these conditions, we're done. It's cut and dried. We can pack it in and say, okay, we've achieved X, Y, and Z, and now we're done over here and on to the next thing. But rather, it's just kind of this metastasizing conflict that is having a lot of effects. And so, I've seen gas go up to $3.70 by me, and that's happened in about the last week. And so now, of course, I'm sitting here thinking about, all right, well, what happens now? Like, how does this affect what we're trying to do on our homestead? And kind of to get into the meat and potatoes beyond just like the political ranting and raving, which I can always do that, certainly. So, if anybody wants to get me going on a rant, just throw something moderately political in the chat, and I'm happy to run with that. But to the nuts and bolts of the farming side of things, I'm looking at this and thinking about, so just to be really open and maybe overshare a little bit, as I mentioned in the videos about Trump, voting for Trump and getting Nikki Haley, kind of the political rant that I went on earlier this week, my house has 3 incomes. So technically I work off the farm as an RN, and then I work on the farm as a chief cook and bottle washer, poop shoveler, scraper, castrator, livestock herdsman in chief, all these different, glowingly impressive titles that I have. And then, of course, my wife does all the management with the kids, which is probably the hardest job out of everything that we do, because she's got the three littles, one of whom is a newborn. And then also, of course, we got the two older girls, 11 going on 12, and then 14 going on, 25. And so, we have these different things in every age group as I am learning, because I've never done this before. I have to remind my kids a lot of times, like, this is my first time being a parent. I know a lot more than, speaking to my children, like, I know a lot more than you guys do, because I have been through, I've played these levels before. I know what's on them. But in terms of being in a position of authority with somebody else going through it, this is my first time doing this stuff. And then my wife, of course, she also works a job, like a money job. I don't know, but what's like commercial job. My wife works a job to provide income as well, which is pretty much full time. So she's got the kids, like 5 kids of all ages, and a full-time job that she works from home. I have hospital job that I work full-time, and I have the farm, which is ideally much less than full-time. Sometimes it's full-time and then some, and other times it's just kind of maintenance, where you're just feeding the animals and kind of letting them grow and do their own thing. And it doesn't have to be quite so, uh, involved. You can always kind of do more, but you don't always have to do that much with the farm. And so we have reached a point with my wife's job where it looks like that job is going to be going away. This was not something that we necessarily anticipated or planned on. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to venture out of her having a job. It just is kind of like, oh, by the way, I got a call from my boss and I got like 2 weeks notice. So this has been something that just literally happened overnight. I found out about this morning, and we've been kind of brainstorming in terms of what do we do and how do we do it, because we have been struggling to keep up financially, especially this winter. The cold has been a significant factor. So we've had a harder winter than in years before. And also the fact that the rates for electricity have been substantially higher than they were in previous years. There's all different rabbit holes we could go down about why electricity costs so much. I think that the AI infrastructure that is being built, put online, and used, and the data centers that are pulling a lot of power and natural resources for cooling, those are not insignificant. And I think a lot of people are not focused on that stuff, because we just kind of take for granted that I can put whatever question I have or my stupid thumbnails into Chat GPT and it's going to spit me out something that works, and thanks and have a nice day. We're not really thinking about the nuts and bolts that go into making that system. And to be a little bit Orwellian here, there is a surveillance state that is taking shape. And despite what everybody may think about this, for decades, I'm old enough to remember at 43 years old, I'm old enough to remember when they went to a lot of trouble to hide the ball in terms of, this is what's going on, this is who's doing what, this is who's in charge, this is who's pulling the strings and the levers behind your back. And if you look at it, realistically speaking, in the last couple of years, it's almost as though they're not trying to hide the ball anymore. And when you look at the infrastructure taking shape that very clearly fits the cutout of a surveillance state, it kind of stands to reason that if they're almost close to having us all on the trailer, all they're waiting for is, now we just got to shut the gate and we can put the feed buckets away and stop pretending like, we're out here for your benefit. We're just going to shut the gate and see you later, take you off to the butcher. And that seems to be what's going on in our society. And I say that not to, black pill, be discouraged or anything like that, but just looking around at what's going on, that kind of seems to be, it would make sense. right? It would make sense if we look at kind of the way things are developing and the way things are taking shape. There's just less and less. We're peeling the onion down further, and there's only so many layers left to go before there's no more onion. And so you kind of do the math, and a surveillance state does make a lot of sense. And that's a whole nother issue and another challenge that we're going to have to learn how to negotiate. I don't really have any great insights on any of that other than to say that the best bet that we have is to simply withdraw, because the system relies on having substrate to put through the system. And when the substrate runs dry, it's just like when you're trying to run a pump and the pump no longer has anything to pull through the pump starts spinning and freaking out and burning because it isn't working, because it doesn't have the proper throughput. And that's the way I would illustrate or compare the population as we disconnect and remove ourselves. It's not something as kinetic as like 1776 type of options, although there's a lot of people that have a lot to say about that. Personally, that's not my wheelhouse. I don't know about, because the big thing that I always think about is like, where would we go from here? It's like, okay, everybody shows up ready to overthrow the system. Okay, great. Now the system is overthrown. Now what? And then it's like, we can look at like Libya circa, what was it, 2014, 2013, something like that, whenever it was that Gaddafi got tipped over. Then what? Where do you go from there? And so a more quiet, thoughtful approach to simply undermining the system, such as it is, by just withdrawing and saying, nope, I'm not going to get sucked up and go through the pump to kind of keep the engines lubricated and warm. I'm going to kind of pull away and do my own thing and remove myself from the system as much as possible. And I don't know that it is possible to do that 100%, but to me, that seems like the best option that anybody can kind of start to do, is to look for ways to disconnect from the system and pull away. And certainly homesteading and farming is one very important way to do that, because the problem with pulling away from the system that is necessitated by everything that's going on, when you pull away from the system, then you're kind of hung out to dry by yourself. And it's just kind of like with hunting or fishing or doing anything with animals, we can look at it where you isolate and contain. And the more isolation you have, then you have control and dominance based on being able to isolate the free thinkers. I know I do this all the time when I'm catching piglets, right? You got to kind of isolate the one, and then you grab them, and that's it. Or you push them into a herd where they can't move, and they become practically isolated because they're jammed up in a group that's not capable of moving. And guys, if you do me a favor, like the stream so that we can get more folks notified, get more people out here if you haven't done that already. That'll help us kind of build the numbers. Also, I want to mention that we do have memberships open, not strictly related to the fact that we are down an income now here at the farm. And we're going to be doing more things, putting more into this platform. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that, improvements, actually, developments that are going to be coming on this end. But the more we get in terms of support from you guys, and certainly being here for these streams, liking them, sharing them, the comments, the participation in the streams, these all go a long way. If you can spare a couple bucks a month to become a member, we're kind of trying to grow that community. And as that gets a little bit more robust, we're going to have more content that's going to be specific to members, so that we can offer some incentives. And one of the things I'm going to be working on is like some deliverables, some books, video courses, stuff like that to folks. And of course, the members are going to get first crack at that stuff. So that's all going to be part of the thing. So anyways, I appreciate you guys being in here and helping us get the word out and, spread the word. But in terms of, trying to unplug from the system, what happens when you unplug from the system is that you become isolated. And then as you're isolated, you're more vulnerable. And so it's really important that we are building community as we unplug from the system, not just unplugging for unplugging's sake, which is why the trope that we see a lot of times on YouTube is kind of this idea of like getting off the grid and kind of, you know, Grizzly Adams type of thing. It's a nice idea, but practically speaking, uh, really the biggest benefit that I would say that I have received from farming has been community, where I have people locally who are on the same wavelength, can understand what I'm doing, that I can barter with, use cash with, that I can commiserate with, that if I need something, I can call them and I know they will be here. If they called me, I would drop what I'm doing. No offense, even though this live stream is very important, I would drop what I'm doing to go help out somebody else who is, you know, a fellow homesteader or farmer. And it builds something that has been kind of eroded from us. And, you know, I think that that is something that doesn't necessarily limit itself to the people who are doing the growing and the farming, but also the people who are participating from a consumer standpoint, because the equation of like sort of the seesaw, we need more people producing and growing. But if we have a lot of people producing and growing, which we're a long way from that, so I think we can afford to get more people doing that. But we've got more people producing and farming and not that many people who are actually consuming and patronizing. I mean, patronizing, not like being sarcastic patronizing. I mean, like buying and interacting with and supporting. Like the more of that that you have, where we can actually balance that out, we can kind of reframe some of the way that the economy operates on a small scale, at least locally. And that's what, you know, I have found in the time that I've been doing farming and trying to increase the profit that we're able to generate here, and looking at all of the stress and the strain and the things that are going on in the world right now. I think we have a choice in front of us whether or not we're going to choose to view this as a crisis, as a problem, as something that we may or may not be able to overcome, and kind of say, you know, too bad, so sad. This is kind of where everything, it just gets very difficult. Or are we going to choose to look at this and say, there's an opportunity here? Because as people are naturally looking at everything that's going on politically, going on with the war, and they're looking for something better, something real, something closer to home, something that is authentic and that has quality to it, we who are interested in and doing homesteading and farming, we have the opportunity to reach out and engage with people who otherwise might have been too busy going along with the status quo and just getting DoorDash to really give much of a care about that. But now all of a sudden the idea of like raising your own animals, hey, not such a bad idea, is it? After all, you got more people who are interested, invested, and willing to listen and to participate. And I think more people who are kind of fed up and willing to get invested and interested in participating as well. And so to me, I think that despite some of the, you know, personal setbacks that we have going on right now, as I've talked about in earlier videos, you know, we had a really rough season farrowing. A lot of piglets got lost. By lost, I mean squashed and dead. And it's real hard having to go out to the barn every morning and pull out another 2 or 3 piglets, and like we wound up with a lot of losses, and that sucks. But at the same time, like I've been blessed with the customers that I'm working with who are open to being a little bit more flexible with the timing, so that they've been willing to say, okay, yeah, we can take our piglets maybe in May or June, because a lot of people in New England are operating under this, I would say, misapprehension that if you don't get your piglets by the end of April, that they're just going to freeze to death come October and they're going to turn into a pumpkin. And the reality is, like, pigs are super hardy and they can thrive on pasture all the way through the winter, including piglets. I mean, I had some farrowing that happened in the fall. My purebred Berkshire sow, Aggie, she went 10 for 10, no problem on the pasture. And everybody that lost all the piglets this year, that all happened in the confines of the barn with heat lamps and other kind of, you know, luxuries associated. But the ones out on the pasture, they did great. So there's more to the story than just like pasture versus barn. And my customers, I've built a relationship with them, and the folks that are doing this stuff, they understand. And so, certainly some of the folks, they need their pigs by an earlier date and they're going to get them. But for other folks that are able to be a little bit more flexible, we have the ability to still kind of maintain a good working relationship, and we'll breed more litters, we'll get more piglets out there, and that's happening. And of course, it's discouraging in the short term, and then having the loss of a job on our side, that means now we have to get a little bit creative and be a little hungry. And as my wife and I were talking about this morning, in some ways it's good because it incentivizes us to actually follow through and really focus and be business minded with what we're doing. There's a saying that my friend Don has imparted to me a few times, and I like it because I think it's a good thing for me to keep in mind. And I think anybody who's doing this kind of thing, it's if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And there's a lot of things where I waste a lot of time, and it's very easy to waste time on your own property when you can always make it a little bit better, you can always make it a little bit cleaner, you can always adjust all of these variables. But there are certain things that when you focus on them, they translate, that focus translates into dollars. And that's something that we gotta kind of reframe what we're doing, and just stop going through the motions and doing what we've been doing, but rather to put our focus on the things that are going to make us money, so that we can have a business that is going to go the distance and that can weather the storms. And when we look back at times like the Great Depression and other manufactured crises that kind of shuffled the deck in terms of who was holding the money, and who's holding the bag and who's kind of not, right? Those who were able to be adaptable and find the silver lining are those that are going to come out ahead, and they're going to be able to, a lot of it comes down to perspective, so that you can look for the opportunity rather than getting upset when you see that you're on the ass end of the pyramid and thinking that that means that that's all there is. I mean, yes, if you're on the ass end of the pyramid, that's not great, but that also means that if you get on the other side of the equation, there's money to be made. And I don't think that it's all about, there's more money to be made other than just buying oil futures like Barron Trump, and then 2 days later your dad declares war, or not declares war, I'm sorry, just starts bombing the shit out of countries to make war happen, but not calling it war. And then the oil futures that you bought, they just go through the roof, and hey, like that's a great dividend. And it's nice if you have access to that kind of stuff. But I think also thinking, maybe not so Machiavellian thought process, but like if we're thinking ahead and saying, okay, like the current system, it's kind of shaky. It doesn't, like, how much further can this go before things start to fall off? And well, people still got to eat. And those of us that are able to help other people to produce their own food, or to produce it for them if they don't have the capability to do it themselves, there's an opportunity for this segment of the economy to grow substantially. I'm not saying we're going to put the grocery stores out of business and Smithfield Pork, I don't know the names. There's a bunch of Chinese guys that own Smithfield Pork, which is the main pork producer in the United States, which is kind of disgraceful. Like, American pork and the head of the leaderboard, like, we're getting outdone by China, who like is outdoing us on our own soil with our own pigs, but kind of using it to their advantage to make kind of lower quality products that are getting foisted over on the Americans. There's a lot to not like about that, and I don't know that we're going to be able to correct that imbalance and put them out of business. But I mean, if we can go from maybe 3% of protein sales up to maybe 6%, maybe 10%, if we really get some momentum behind this, that's not an unachievable goal. And that's a big step, because that puts some momentum behind what we're doing and gets it to where, you know, there's ideas forming where people can look around and say, hey, you know what, maybe I could grow pigs. I mean, I never did when I was a kid because I didn't know anybody who was doing that. But now there's more people that are homesteading, that are, you know, chickens and goats and what have you. People are starting to do it. The more that that happens, that snowball is going to roll down the hill. And as the snowball starts to pick up some momentum, as, you know, things start popping off, let's say, there's going to be a lot more of that, because, and I truly and honestly hope I'm wrong. I don't have some big rug pull scenario a la Barron Trump set up here where the, you know, some bad thing is going to happen and trucking, shipping, fuel, etc. kind of takes a dive, and now all of a sudden everything is at a standstill. And hey guys, well, I have fresh pork, and all of a sudden, you know, money is good for a short time, because then, oh yeah, how are we going to feed the pigs? That's a whole nother conversation, right? But I think that as there are hiccups and the costs of everything go up, people are going to want to be closer to that stuff and have more of an active role in that, rather than just kind of taking for granted that when they go to the grocery store, that stuff is going to show up and it's going to be affordable. It's going to potentially get a little bit spicy. So on a little personal note here, to circle back to kind of the situation at the Rowan Ridge farm homestead compound, whatever you want to call it, being down in income, or presently it's going to happen. Currently, we still got a couple weeks until that actually happens, but looking at going down in income, the question is, okay, what are our options? And this is an ongoing thing that we're still working through, we're trying to figure out. But I think, to me, one of the main sources or opportunities for income is obviously YouTube. And I love making videos, I love doing live streams, but the time involved in being able to dedicate time and resources to doing that kind of stuff is very limiting with everything else that I have going on. And so my wife is going to be hopefully learning a little bit about the video editing process and taking a little bit of that off of my plate, so that I am able to record videos and just spend my time laying down videos of the different things that we have coming up to talk about. And that instead of going from maybe like one-ish video a week, being able to go to maybe 3 videos a week, or even 2 videos a week, plus a live stream at this point. And we'll try to ramp it up and basically put the hammer down a little bit more with what we're doing, so that that creates the opportunity for some passive income just from you guys watching the videos and liking the streams. If you haven't done so already, I can see there's 5 of you in here and only 3 likes on the stream. Come on, let's see if we can bump that number up. But basically, the passive income that comes with the, you know, people watching the videos. And then the next thing that we're going to be working on developing is, I'm working on putting together a couple of little guides, call it like free ebooks. I know a lot of folks, whether or not this is you or not, and maybe it was you at one point, maybe not you at this point, but for folks that are beginners, that are trying to get a foot in the door, foot on the ladder, trying to get started with homesteading and pigs specifically, I'm putting together a free PDF that is going to go to the folks that are subscribed to our email list. I am not a big fan of getting too many emails, and by extension, I don't have the time to write a ton of emails, but I want to have an email list so that I can connect with you guys when we have things going on, and when we need to have communication that's a little bit more reliable and more free from oversight and control. Because the reality is, everybody, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, now would be a great time to do that as well. But I'm assuming most of you guys have already subscribed to the channel. And so that's awesome that we have that connection. But the reality is that YouTube owns that connection. I don't own my channel. I don't own my subscribers. So I'm operating under the good graces, or at the mercy, the whims of the YouTube management and their team. Hey, Fear Not Farm is here. Good to see you, man. You know, we're operating under their mercy, such as it is, and at any moment they could change their mind and revoke that, and everything could change. And I mean, if you look at what happened during the pandemic, which shall not be specifically named because I don't know if they care about that anymore. I'm trying not to get, like, you know, the stream pulled or shadow banned or whatever. I want to stay in the good graces of the algorithm, which is silly to hear myself saying that, but I want to reach more people. But if you look at what happened during the pandemic, there was a lot of people who just got completely sidelined as a result of what was going on politically and socially, and it was all done through these platforms that everybody thought that, you know, they hadn't seen anything like that before. Think about 2018, 2019. I mean, there were some platforms like, okay, Reddit is a leftist cesspool, and Twitter is kind of nonsensical in its own way. And at the time, it was cat videos and illicit content for adults, let's say, right? There were these kind of generalizations, but there wasn't anything that draconian as like, oh, my channel just got taken down and completely struck. I mean, there was a handful of people that got their stuff yanked, were deplatformed, etc. That did happen, but it was fairly limited. And then what we saw in the 2020 timeframe with the civil unrest, and then the hardcore censorship that came down on all of the platforms, and they all try to pretend, oh, what are you talking about? That we didn't do that. Yeah, it was all over the place. It was every single platform, and now it's super important that we are managing what we are doing with an eye towards worst case scenario, not to be dramatic and dark and black-pilled or whatever you want to call it, but to be able to say, okay, I know that what I'm doing is going to be able to go the distance because I have an email list. So I will continue to use the YouTube platform as long as they permit me to do so and the relationship is mutually beneficial. But I am not obligated to conform to their standards in order to survive, because I'm building a community of my own, an email list of my own. And in order to build that email list, of course, I'm using the age-old tactic of creating a free book, free guide, free tips and tricks that are going to be useful for folks that are beginners, and maybe even have some information in there that might be worth the email subscription and the download, to be able to get that for you guys as well. And then once that is intact and we're able to grow our email list, then there are other products and services that I'm going to try to create. Namely, I want to write a book. Some of it is going to be like nuts and bolts of homesteading stuff that I've learned, and just pigs, and there's, I mean, look at Joel Salatin. The guy's a farmer, but he's written a lot of really interesting books. I'm no Joel Salatin, of course, not trying to, you know, put myself on his level, but I would like to be able to, you know, use the time and the experience that I've put in both in farming and in other pursuits to be able to put some content out there that would be worthwhile for some of you guys. And also, obviously, while doing more of these streams and doing more of these videos so that we can kind of keep growing what we're doing here. And then the other thing that is kind of like the big one that I'm trying to do is a seminar, again, related to homesteaders who are beginning with pigs, because I know that's kind of like the biggest target out there to hit. And we are in a target-rich environment because more and more people are getting interested in this stuff, and there's a lot of opportunity as more people come to me. I mean, I've been doing the classes here physically on site at the farm here in southwestern-ish, central western New Hampshire, and I've been surprised at how many people are willing to come and participate. And I want to offer that general concept, package it in book form, and then also do a video seminar, kind of video on demand type of thing, where everything is clearly illustrated, and then also with some mentorship built into so that people who want that have access to it. And a lot of you guys that are doing, have been doing this as long or longer than I have, and that I could learn from you. I mean, you're probably not going to want to spend the money on that, but we can, hang out in the live streams and we can learn from each other and grow the community. But this way, there's a resource that I can make available to people who have gotten something out of the free content that I'm providing and want to go a little bit further, go a little deeper, and want to learn. And then obviously there's always more that can be done in terms of content creation, books, videos, anything like that, where there's a need that I'm able to fill, whether or not it is like how-to stuff, because I know there's a lot of that out there. So this is just kind of a starting point. I think that in terms of advocacy and talking about farming and building, I hate to use the term community building because it has a political sense that is wrapped up in that does not align with my own personal. I mean, I am politically homeless, but my political sensibilities are not towards the community organizers. But the reality is that we've been getting beat for a long time because our community doesn't do a very good job of organizing, which is why we're all kind of blowing around like tumbleweeds out in the wind, and we need more of that. And this is kind of the way that we're going to kind of try to put a little shape around that and do that while trying to make a little bit of money, since my wife's income has been cut off at this point. And then we'll only have 2 jobs between us, but well, we'll have a 3rd job technically, because the YouTube channel, the content, and then of course expanding what we're doing, or maintaining the current rate of expansion, I should say, because we are not expanding the farm beyond what we have on our 10 acres, but there's going to be more property development, meaning cutting down trees so that there's little silvopasture starting to happen, running the pigs up the hill into the woods, let them kind of rearrange some of the rocks and some of the terrain so that we can raise more pigs, raise more piglets, sell more pork, get more people from the community in here and involved in what we're doing, and then see where it goes from there. I mean, that's probably what I've articulated just now, and I am going to get to the chat, guys, I promise. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of on a roll here. What I've just articulated is easily a year's worth of solid work. But personally, I am of the opinion, of the belief, that without taking anything away from what we're doing physically on the farm, there is gold in them thar hills to be able to grow what we're doing from a content and a community standpoint here on YouTube. I think there's a big opportunity to do that, where we can basically repurpose the time that's being lost from my wife's income that's going by the wayside, and spin that into something where we can provide services for you guys and build community and advocacy around what we're doing, and then also supplement incomes as part of that. So let me get into the chat here. I see Fear Not Farm. I'm going to go back a little bit. I was going to tell you that the political topics, it seems as though unless you have a huge base, it will definitely hurt you in the algorithm. They do tend to not want the general consensus coming to any conclusions. Yeah, that makes sense. And for me, it's sort of a calculated risk, because I know there's a handful of people who care and who watch everything that I'm putting out. And also some of it is just to kind of put it there, not necessarily for right now, but also for posterity, to be able to say, hey, not I told you so, but kind of, yeah, I kind of told you so. And for me, a lot of what I do on this, very selfishly, is just I want to get stuff off my chest. I think by speaking, when I'm down there with the pigs, they get a piece of my mind every day, whether they like it or not. And that's how I synthesize and manipulate ideas, as I talk through them. And so unless well, I mean, even if it does hurt me a little bit in the algorithm, it's all part of the farming. Like the political stuff is, you can't separate the world we live in from the world that we are creating, because those things touch at some point. And I think it almost is disingenuous to try to put a barrier between the two and separate them. I mean, to a certain extent, there's issues and videos that I have that I'm not going out of my way to insert political rants and statements into them. But realistically speaking, it just, there's a lot of overlap. And I feel, and I'm not saying this in judgment towards anyone else, but I'm just knowing how I feel and what is in my head. I feel like if I partition that and don't put it out there, that I'm being somehow disingenuous by kind of hiding how I feel about things, because a lot of those things are going to shape the terrain of what we are involved in and what we are doing and what we are going to be doing, because the world is changing. They are not hiding the ball anymore. We are headed for something. I don't know what exactly that is. I was willing to hope that that's something we were heading for was the golden age. I know, gullible, got duped. Easier to fool somebody than to convince them that they have been fooled, more or less. Paraphrase the words of Mark Twain. And yeah, I'm walking, breathing example of that. But in light of all of that, I want to be clear about where I stand and not leave anything to guesswork, because I think there are other people who are, I mean, just like when during the summer of love in the pandemic of sorts, there were a lot of people who got conned by the black squares on Instagram and all the people who were beating the drums and calling you names and putting labels on you. Well, now it's literally the same thing that's happening, only it's the right who's beating the war drums and putting labels on people. Because if you have the audacity to criticize or critique, and criticism and critique is not a negative thing. There's a big difference between saying, oh, like, you know, you're a fascist and all like the other kind of the ad hominem attacks that were coming on from generally the left prior to the election. It's not that type of thing when you're saying, hey, look, I'm on your side, but you're like sticking you're sticking something that should not be stuck in a hornet's nest. You're sticking it in a hornet's nest. That's going to be bad for everybody. How about like go the other way? Because remember what you said? This was the plan. You articulated the plan. Everybody got on board with that plan. And now you're going a different direction. Hang on. This is not what we agreed to. Because you got to think from a standpoint, being generous, right? You got to think somebody who's running a country, the people that they have in their ear are not going to be, you know, they're not, presumably, they're not scrolling through Twitter and kind of looking at what everybody's saying all the time. They're eliminating a lot of that feedback so that they can just kind of get things done based on the function. And so in my mind, if normal people like us, the peasants, are able to open our mouths and say, hey, here's what I see, here's what's going on, but also to do it in a way that is honest, but not bashful, where we can say, hey, look, it's okay to have a difference of opinion on this stuff. It's okay to say, yeah, I voted for Trump and I liked the things he said when he was campaigning, but the guy has screwed us and we are now involved in something. Like when you kill the Ayatollah, that's not something that you can just be like, okay, well, let's sit down and talk and maybe we can work something out. Okay, what do you think, guys? Let's meet in Doha. Like, right? It's cool. No, like you killed their Pope. And the guy was old enough that he would have kicked the bucket anyways. And I mean, and I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but it's just like the whole thing was very silly. It's like you can't just decouple from this engagement and just say, okay, well, we bombed everybody enough and glassed the whole thing. Now everything is done and we're just going to go back over here. Like, you can't just leave it. Now that you started it, now you have to manage it. Like, you bought the ticket, now you're taking the ride. And I don't know who kind of convinced the president. Well, I do know who convinced the president. Obviously, there are certain elements within his leadership, and obviously there's foreign leaders like our greatest ally that obviously have been leaning on him, as they have been leaning on previous administrations, 2 and 3 previous presidents deep, to do the exact same thing, and they were able to bait the hook with a little bit of complimentary ego stroking that he just couldn't refuse, and like, oh, okay, fine, yeah, it'll be cool, it'll work out. And now there's no conditions that have been put out there to say, hey, this is what victory looks like. If this happens, we're done. If this happens, we go home and say, no, sorry. There's no conditions for victory that have been established. Everything is just like, oh, it's going to be great. And well, there's a little short-term pain and suffering, but like everything is so diffuse that it's very, very, very concerning. But we can't do anything about that. And I would argue that those kind of things have been happening for a very long time. And at the end of the day, as irritated as it makes me just on a personal level that I sacrificed my credibility for this blowhard who just kind of turned around, dropped his pants, and took a giant dump on all of us, I take that personally because, like I said, I sacrifice credibility, I sacrifice relationships based on that, my political stances. At the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do, and that's always the way that it's been. It's just the peasants have a little bit more of a window into that now than they did before. Anyways, so I digress. Blue Wagon Farm, hi. Hello. Good to see you here. Fear Not says, I will say that I have gone unhinged before and seen a direct shut off of my channel. It takes quite a bit to dig yourself out of that hole. I have a smaller channel that I still can't get 3 views. David Coley Art says, my wife also does self-published books, graphics, and publishing packs. David, that's something that maybe if you wouldn't mind shooting me an email, info@nhpork.com, or just drop me a comment or something so that I can connect with you. I'd be interested to pick your brain about some of that stuff, because I'm thinking about with doing books, doing like print on demand, probably using Amazon because they're, I know the great Satan, but they're the devil, and everything goes through them. So I was thinking about using them for some on-demand publishing type of stuff, but always happy to like get some credible expertise and suggestions on this. So I'd appreciate that actually. Fear Not says, I've been thinking about doing some chicken cleaning classes. I just need to get everything streamlined. You can get roosters super cheap at the poultry auctions. Yeah, there's a lot that you can do. I'm assuming what you mean is marketing like an information-based products, or are you talking about doing like in-person classes? Either way, there's a lot of opportunity for that. I mean, granted, you're, I believe, in Texas or Oklahoma, Texas, right? We're in New Hampshire, but I can tell you here in New Hampshire, there's a ton of people that are always on the Facebook groups that are saying, hey, where's, I need somebody to process my chickens for me. There's one guy who is, I'll bite my tongue. I don't want to be a jerk, but there's one guy that does chicken processing pretty much that is out there. From what I have heard, he does a decent job with the work that he does on the chickens. If you need him to be civil to you as a person and you're after 10 a.m., that's a different story because, it's beer o'clock after that. But still, does a good job with his work with poultry. Nobody wants to deal with poultry. I have seen it done a couple of times. I didn't want to deal with poultry when I was butchering here. I was like, no, find somebody else, do that yourself. But everybody that I have heard, the repeated line is, it's not that bad. You just get a bunch of people together, you do it all in one shot, you knock it out, make a day of it, and you get it done. And I think that is, especially with as many people as are raising chickens, that's like chickens are the gateway into homesteading and self-reliance in terms of food independence. So I think when we're talking about producing protein, it's a relatively easy step to ask people to take, to say, hey, like grow a couple extra birds, let your birds go broody, raise a few extra, feed them out, they'll lay some eggs. When they're done, you start cycling through some of the older hens, and then you can put them in your freezer. That adds an entirely different dimensionality to the process of what people are doing than if it's just like, oh, I have a couple chickens that are raising eggs and I can sell eggs, and that's all well and good. But if you can add actual meat into the process of what you're doing, and you could teach those classes and get people involved. That's huge. I think there's a lot of market for that people need. And then again, when you're selling an information product, doing a well photographed, clearly visualized step by step, and putting that into written format or a electronic written format like a PDF or an ebook, and then also just doing video stuff like that. I think there's a market for that. Isaac says, is there a community group, maybe a Facebook group or something? You know what? Great question. No, there is not at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a poll and give you guys a chance to weigh in on this. Start a poll. Would you join? Let me do this here so you don't have to look at the top of my hat. Would you join a Facebook? Ooh. If I set it up? Question mark. Yes or no? And there we go. Yeah, so I mean, I've done Facebook groups in the past, not in the farming past, but in my previous lives. Usually, as it turned out, the groups didn't have a lot of momentum. I kind of hate Facebook for a variety of reasons, but I'm open to doing it and setting it up because I do check in on Facebook, and it would be cool to have people in there, even just as a place to kind of connect and hang out with folks. I would yeah, Secret Noise Pictures, welcome. So I would join a Facebook group, but I don't have Facebook. Well, you're one step ahead of the rest of us. We're all in the process of going Amish eventually, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I can start a group on there, and I'll put a post on the YouTube page. And if you guys want to join that, we could do that, and kind of see how it goes. I mean, there's not really a downside. It doesn't cost me much to just put something together, put it up there, and we'll see. And it might be something that joins. It, kind of gives us the luxury of having this chat dynamic, but at a slower pace and on a consistent basis, and it doesn't go away. So we have a little more access to that little bit of community. And ironically, I think there are more folks that are here. I want to give a shout out to Brandon. My buddy Kent, his neighbor, I think. We met once at Kent's house, and he was telling me that, like, oh yeah, my buddy Brandon came over and he was talking about like watching your live stream, and he's like a big fan. I was like, that's wild. I didn't know that there were people in New Hampshire, other than like there's a handful of you guys on here that I know because you guys are active in the chat, but like there are people who are familiar with the effort that I'm putting in. So I'm big shout out and appreciate you guys, taking the time to tune in. That's very flattering and humbling, because time is, a non-renewable resource, and that means a lot to know that there are people that are, actually taking, well, I know there are because you guys are here, but I'm just saying it's like, it hits a little bit different when it's somebody that's actually close enough to you that knows you, where it's like they know who you actually are because they've met you, and it's like they're not, you can kind of convince people with wacky thumbnails and titles, get people to click, but when it's a little bit closer to home, it's a different vibe. So yeah, I appreciate that. Blue Wagon Farm says, we spent the day at our local Tractor Supply for farmers market. I took a few weakling piglets with me to show off, and I had 400 conversations about pigs. It's amazing how little people know. Very interesting. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this. Like, how do we get more of those conversations started? And I mean both in person and otherwise. And I will acknowledge that I have been tempted to do, and I saw somebody else doing this locally, which is, it's totally, a ripoff of their idea. I just kind of think I can do it better. And, not trying to be a dingus, but I'm just saying, where basically they have this like playtime with kids where like you can rent piglets, not rent piglets like take them somewhere else, but where like you kind of set up a clean area and the piglets go in and like a cage match with piglets and toddlers. What could go wrong, right? Where they can come and play together and the kids get to experience farm animals, but on an approachable scale, and you get to make some money. Obviously, biosecurity is something that needs to be thought of. So I'm not 100% sold on doing this, but that is one mechanism for starting conversations and getting more people involved with interacting with farms. And that is also something that I'm hoping to do as we kind of turn this corner in trying to take the next step in developing the business. Now that we are down in income streams, as my wife her job is gone or going by the wayside in a couple of weeks, that we can develop, obviously selling meat, right? That seems like a no-brainer, but to use that as a means to get people onto the farm, to have conversations, to introduce people to agriculture, because people have a lot of ideas about agriculture, but most of that is not based in reality from having had conversations with people who are actually producing animals and like producing products. It's a lot of it is from a distance, and I would like to make more of that happen, like directly, on hand or on, in the real world. Blue Wagon Farm says, I'd love to share with more people or share more with people. And yeah, we got to figure out a way to do that. And that's kind of the next step. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think that as society burns down around our ears, I think there are going to be more people who are going to be looking for small farmers, homesteaders. Hey, I want to be friends. Hey, what do we have to do to get, go in on a pig, or etc. And there might, I think it's a good way to raise the profile and the legitimacy of people who are starting to see the system failing us. So there are more people who are willing to say, hey, look, I don't care about USDA inspection. What has the USDA ever done for me? Like, I just want some meat to give to my family. How do we work that out? And as there's trust. I'm not saying, for the purposes of the algorithm and the YouTube, I'm not suggesting that anybody break any food laws or anything like that. We have to make sure that the USDA approves everything that we do. Otherwise, we're obviously going to get botulism and die like all of our ancestors before us, who didn't have the benefit of the USDA and their ultimate wisdom governing all the things that they ate, and the fact that they lived for millennia without any refrigeration, anything like that. I know that's terrible that they did that, and that's why they all died. Although ironically, we got here, so some of them must have survived. But anyways, there's more people that are going to be willing to interact with us on a non-systemic level, so that we're able to have more customers and a wider base of people that are looking for what we're doing. And so on some level, I guess I would say that marketing might be about to get much easier as the system falls away. What's going to be left standing when the system collapses? That's the question, because right now, if we look at the signal to noise ratio, right, there's a lot of noise up here, and the signal is down here, where we're like, hey guys, we have good quality meats, we have good quality products, ethically sourced, it's raised in a humane way, and it's actually good food that you can feel good about. And everybody's like, yeah, that's nice. Hang on, I got to go to Dollar General to get some Smithfield pork because it's cheap. But at some point, again, I will say, I hope that I am wrong, but as the system collapses, the noise comes down, because, well, maybe the noise doesn't, there's going to be other noise to replace the system collapsing. But the point is, people are unable to avoid noticing what's going on. The great noticing is taking place. And as that happens, the position or the profile of homesteaders and homestead farmers becomes more, it climbs by extension, because it's like, okay, wait, all these years I thought that the USDA was the holy grail of food quality, and that they were going to put our needs first, and they were going to make everything work out for us. And then now we have food shortages and can't get protein and rationing and all these price increases and all this nonsense that's going on. Now all of a sudden the homesteaders who are USDA system wide skeptical, now you guys aren't, we're not the crazies anymore. Now it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we need to get on side with these guys because, we can work together to be able to maintain some quality of life and build some community. I think that's going to hopefully happen. All right, going down the chat here so that I don't get too sidetracked. Let's see. I'm just trying to use the mouse on the old pant leg trick. That's hard to do. Okay, what do we got here? Chris Heitzman says if you do quail, they are a good one. Premium prices and extremely rapid turnaround. Very interesting. That is well above my pay grade. Have not done anything. I mean, I think the same could be said with turkeys or similar things. I know there's a big market for turkeys predominantly in the fall for the holidays, but yeah, I don't know much about doing the poultry at this point. Fear Not Farm says in-person classes or other people host similar classes and do well. I'm also thinking about doing welding classes. Yeah, welding is a big thing. My buddy Kent, he taught me a little bit about welding, taught me enough to know that I'm going to have him do my welding if I need it to actually work, and it's not just purely decorative. And decorative, but can also still be ugly. That's the welding I'm going to do, at least for the time being, because welding is not easy. But yeah, welding is super useful skill to have. Absolutely. Chris Heitzman, I said no to Facebook, but don't let my vote get you down. I left Facebook and have no regrets. Yeah, I mean, that's a reasonable, I can take that because it's not ultimately a rejection of the group or of my efforts. It's a rejection of the platform, and I get that because Facebook sucks butt and there's no way around that, unfortunately, which is part of the reason why I try not to spend much of my time on there. Fear Not Farm says, I made my own chicken plucker. You absolutely need one to make it worthwhile, in my opinion, unless you just raise like a dozen birds. Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen those chicken pluckers, but I did not know you could make your own. That is an interesting thing where if you haven't made a video about that, I feel like that would be an obvious video that needs to be made. Blue Wagon Farm says, here in Texas, it's more about ignorance of pork. They're all about beef or wild hogs that they hunt. Side note, we invite people to come to our farm and pick their own eggs, pet the pigs, etc. Yeah, that's a cool idea. And I always put out there when I have folks that want to buy a half or a whole hog from me, and certainly once we get the USDA stuff put in the freezer and we get the storefront set up here, that creates an opportunity to, like my wife and I were talking about that, where it's like a good opportunity to build bridges into and with the community, where we get people to come and see how we're raising the animals and pick the pig that they're gonna, that they want, and also to get people to spend a little time with feeding the animals, helping out with chores if they want, so that they can actually take a more active role if they want that. So far, not a ton of people lining up to do chores, but the option does exist there. And I think it's also worth pointing out, just on a side note, oh, and Fear Not is in Oklahoma, Blue Wagon is in Texas. I'm sorry, I always get you guys mixed up because like your screen names, I'm like just looking at a distance, your screen names always kind of look kind of similar in the chat to me from a distance, and the logos are like, there's a little tinge of blue on the Blue Wagon logo, but I always get you guys confused, so my apologies. Girly Girl says, hi from Wyoming. Not sure what we are talking about. Well, that makes two of us. Yeah, we're kind of talking about the World War III farming and kind of how that's impacting things, whether or not that's going to be a crisis or an opportunity. I think the option exists for either, depending on the way that we look at it. And just talking about some things that we are going to be doing around the old YouTube channel and the farm physically, because our family income streams went from like 3 down to 2 because my wife looks like they're going to be cutting her position. But that kind of gives us the incentive to really get in gear with trying to monetize and make the YouTube thing work. So, certainly the memberships here, and those are a great way, for folks who want to help us make more content to help us do that. But then also, we're going to get some ebooks going, and also some print on demand books, and then eventually video courses to help more people who are just getting into working with pigs, to help them make that step confidently as we continue to grow what we're doing here on the farm with the pigs, with breeding, and also with marketing pastured pork. And guys, if you haven't done so already, please like the stream, because that's going to help us reach more people and get more folks involved with what we're doing. It makes a big difference to help get the word out and get more participation. And let's see, Secret Noise Pictures says the education part is always key to get people to understand the product that you were providing to them. Sometimes it's very hard to explain the cost and why it's not the grocery store prices to them. Yeah, I agree completely. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, focus on my YouTube channel to make it about the farm, is because I want to, and this is something that I have to figure out. I haven't figured out how to, well, I'm not big enough yet to play the algorithm to get non-farming people watching my streams and my content. I don't think. Maybe there are. Maybe there's some of you guys. I see we have 7 concurrent viewers at this point. Are any of you not farmers? I'm genuinely curious to know, because we hear a lot from the farmers in the streams, but maybe there are people that just pop in and enjoy checking out the content, but that are not personally involved in growing stuff at this point. And so, I want to be able to use the YouTube channel to communicate with more people, so that it kind of turns the light on in their head where they say, oh yeah, why is this more expensive? Why can't you just sell me, a pound of bacon? Why does the USDA have to be involved? Because you can give me a pound of bacon. The USDA does not give a rip if I give you a pound of bacon. Hell, I can give you a side of pork. They don't care in the slightest. They're not worried about you getting sick. However, God forbid you stroke my palm with some greenery, cash that is, then, oh no, stop the presses, hang on a second, what's going on here? We can't have this. This isn't regulated. This isn't supervised. That meat might have botulism. Who knows? You're going to get E. coli. What's the, water testing that's being done? How many bathrooms do you have on site? What's your sewage treatment plan? Right? Now all of a sudden that matters as soon as money changes hands, which should tell you that it's all a big scam, and it's all been a big scam for a long time, since the 70s at least. I mean, there's a lot of scams that have been perpetrated on the American people, but none are more obvious than the scams that really started coming to light in the 70s as soon as LBJ took over. And you can take that a number of different directions, which I will not draw all of the obvious connections for you, but the what was it, the Wholesome Food Act, which is what basically cut small producers off at the knees and made it so that the big producers, they can cash their checks and their big systems get bigger and they keep right on rolling. And now you have 4 companies that produce most of the meat for the nation. And one of those companies is owned by China, which we're not on great terms with them, and yet they're like all over our farmland, which seems kind of silly, because if you think about the logistics of, national defense, security, all that stuff, and welcome to the stream. Yeah, when you think about the logistics of security, armies march on their stomachs. So if you have a nation full of people that don't have secure access to food buttoned up from like coast to coast, you have a massive risk in terms of your national security. And hello, like China owns our biggest pork producer. They could raise the prices, yank the cords, take the pigs, ship them off to somebody else. I don't know. There's a lot that they could do to screw with our food supply when you're looking at a substantial amount of our pork products that would suddenly go off the shelves and be gone. And it seems like we should be thinking about ways to counteract that and to manage that threat. And the obvious way to do that is you, with pigs on your property, growing a couple of them every year, breeding a little bit, maybe somebody, your neighbor breeds them, you know, like the bartering, like there's enough pork to go around where people could deal with that. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. I digress. Let's see. And yes, it is not lost on me, because I know you guys are going on in the chat a little, which I'm happy to see you guys having those conversations, but I'm getting left behind because I'm ranting, surprisingly, right? Who would have thought? But it is not lost on me the irony of the fact that in a situation like what very likely is coming down the road, those of you who are raising Idaho pasture pigs, Ossabaw, Mangalitsa, American guinea hog, mulefoot, I believe Maishans probably fall into that group to a limited extent. Some of the old spots, Coonies. Did I say Idaho pasture pigs? I think they were the first one because they're always the main target because they have the most name recognition. Like there's not as many videos and, you know, homesteaders getting bombarded with your first pig should be Mangalitsas, even though, you know, Idaho pasture pigs, those are kind of the first ones. But that type of homestead pig that produces more fat and that is able to get by on less grain under the current circumstances, you know, it's very easy for me to talk about the profitability of a, you know, purebred Berkshire or a Berkshire Duroc cross, you know, kind of a generic heritage breed meat cross that finishes faster, hangs heavier, has lower percentage fat, and ideally with good genetics can still have great marbling and make a superior tasting product. But it's not lost on me that a lot of what I'm doing would go by the wayside if the feed trucks stop running. And that is something that I am very concerned about. And that's one of the reasons why, yeah, I dipped my toe into the political stuff to say, hey, Trump, like, you screwed us and you duped me. And that is unforgivable because I know right now it's just rantings and ravings and maybes and whatnots by the disaffected people. But when it comes midterm time and you want us to support you and you're going to turn around and tell, you know, you're going to piss on my leg and tell me that it's raining. And it's like, oh, look how much better we are. We're making tons of money. It's like, yeah, who? The people that own the oil companies, the Israelis, like, good for them. And I don't think that, realistically speaking, it's really good for the Israelis because they're incurring a lot of damage because of the fact that they're now, you know, on the X and are getting hit with everything that comes their way. So I don't think this is really good for anybody, and it's going to be really hard to ignore that when it comes time for the midterms. But looking at the price of feed, it's really difficult for me to just kind of circle the wagons and operate independently of those externalities. Whereas if you're raising Idaho pasture pigs, if you're raising Mangalitsas, those animals that are able to get by on a lot more forage, well, you probably are going to have a better time serving your market when, you know, we're a year into a fuel shortage, when grain has gone way through the roof. Yeah, you don't have to buy nearly as much grain and you can just, you know, work on your cover crops, work on your foraging. Now, granted, if you're trying to sell at the scale to actually produce pork broadly, not just for your own family, for your own freezer, you might still be struggling depending on, unless you have a lot of land that is managed very well. So I don't know that that's a universal statement of, you know, I'm not universally retracting my criticisms or the nuances that I've presented up to this point about the Idaho pasture pig, but I do want to look at things on the flip side, because prior to the 2024 election, when things were kind of spicy politically and socially on the ground, And it was like, well, what's going to happen if Trump loses, or if it's a close race and there's some political stuff going on? You know, is everything going to kind of pop off? And I was thinking very seriously about repurposing a decent amount of my herd into Mangalitsa's and just having a lot more foraging happening on my property for my feed, so that I could I could, you know, deal with the reality that there's a slower finishing time, and there's a, you know, the nuances and realities of the carcasses and the difference that that makes in the finishing time and the economics of all of that. But I would know that, hey, I'm still going to be able to feed my family even if the feed truck stops running. Now, having said that, I think that I can still manage to, because like pigs are very adaptable, and the root hog or die, that's something that I think can be done with enough resilience and ingenuity. I think we can find ways to make that work even with other breeds. But the point is, there are some breeds that are a shoe-in for that, and then there are other breeds where you have to figure out how to get them hungry enough and make them eat the hay instead of just eating grain all the time. And there's, you know, yeah, it's not a, it adds a layer of complexity to what we're talking about when it's like, okay, what do we do if the feed trucks stop running? You know, that's a different conversation. Fear Not Farm says, do you have any small dairies around you? What does a gallon of milk cost? Ooh, gallon of milk, I want to say that's 4 something. I don't drink a ton of milk. There is I do have a farm that makes cheese, and I get whey from them on my way home from work. So I do have whey available. That's something that I was supplementing the food with. And as I looked at it, I did a little bit of research on the nutritional value of whey. Basically, a half a bucket or so of whey. These conversions are not exactly precise, but a half a bucket of whey, basically like 2.5 gallons of whey, roughly have the same nutritional value as a bucket of feed, somewhere in that neighborhood. Maybe it's just the lysine. It's been a little bit since I've done the research into whey products, but there is a tremendous amount of nutritional value in them, at least in terms of raw protein and also lysine. Obviously, in terms of the energy that you can get from just drinking straight whey, that's going to be a different story. So you do need to have some grain, some carbohydrates somewhere in the mix, unless you got like full-on keto pigs. But it's going to be, you know, the lysine will definitely allow you to stretch lower nutritional quality and then bolster or supplement that with the lysine in the whey. And otherwise, the other farms that I'm talking about, they're just going to throw it away. Saying whey all the time. I feel like a tongue twister. Chris Heitzman says, so quail always seem to price higher than chickens. Quail can be butchered and also start laying at 6 weeks. Wow, that's fast. Same feed conversion as chickens, but by the time a chicken starts laying, by the time a chicken starts laying at 21 weeks, quail are already on generation 3 to 3.5 from original hatch. However, you do have to use an incubator. Eggs sell well to Asian communities. Very interesting. Now that, I did not know. I know I hear people talking about quail and asking about quail in some of the forums on Facebook. You know, one of the things, since we're talking about quails and specialty items, there is a comedian that I watch occasionally. His name is Jimmy Carr. He's the guy who laughs funny on YouTube. And he's a British chap and very cheeky. Has some interesting, he likes to do crowd work where he gets heckled by the crowd and then he just completely eviscerates them in front of everybody. And it's kind of a running gag that he does. But one of his shows, a kid asked him for advice about, like, what's the best advice that you've ever gotten and that you would want to pass on to young people. And he said, don't be the best, be the only. And I think that when we look at the things that other people don't want to do, where the market is much less saturated for obvious reasons, if we can find a way to get a foot in the door there and build a business around the thing that nobody else can do or wants to do well enough to make it really shine, there's a lot of opportunity there. And it sounds like quail, that could be an opportunity there. And even in terms of wild quail, and this is a little bit more of not a survival tactic, but when I planted sunflower seeds, which sunflower seeds are real cheap at like any hardware store or like Tractor Supply, I planted just generic bird seed sunflower seeds out in the field, and I had turkeys, I had quail. The birds they really took a liking to the fact that I had sunflower seeds. And I'm probably going to plant some more this spring. Cleans the soil up a little bit from what I've been told. They use them in nuclear sites to remove some of the mercury out of the ground. I believe mercury is the thing that sunflowers clean up and remove. Also, I'm going to be putting a lot of mulberry trees on my property. Mulberry, very good for silvopasture, lots of protein and lysine in the leaves. Then obviously the berries also attracts birds, also good forage for the pigs. It's it's a good deal. So we're going to be doing a lot with mulberries this year. Girly Girl said 1982 says, oh, gotcha, opportunity for sure. Chris Heitzman says quail do require higher protein feed, which is more expensive, but cash flow is far higher versus chickens due to rapid turnover of saleable product. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Girly Girl says, I love my Pekin ducks and the eggs are crazy sought after. I don't know if you guys know Mike O'Hearn. He is a all-natural bodybuilder who used to be one of the, what the hell is the name of that show? The Gladiators. Mike O'Hearn, bodybuilder guy. He was selling duck eggs, and that was like a big viral thing for a while, where everybody in fitness wanted duck eggs because they have a little more protein, they have some more micronutrients in them, they have better amino acid profile, I guess. And American Gladiators, that's right, Mike O'Hearn. He's the guy who swears up and down he's never taken any PEDs, but the guy is like completely peeled 12 months out of the year. I mean, he is a genetic freak to begin with, but a guy that looks like that probably is doing some gear, but he definitely helped to make duck eggs popular. And guys, if you haven't liked the stream already, make sure you go ahead and like that. Help us get this out to more folks. Fear Not says, Chris, I just saw 15 big quail sell for $3 a piece at our local auction. I should have bought them and plucked them. Chris says, I had quail, and even in just a 3-stack cage, I had quail eggs coming out of my ears, even after continuous butchering. Wow, that's interesting. I did not realize. I always heard kind of that quail are kind of fragile and they're hard to get going, but I guess what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that quail, once you get them in an environment where it's to their liking and they're able to survive well, that they just can be very prolific. And that sounds really cool. Fear Not says, they're on my list to get. Girly says, I am super new to all farm things, and I found your channel during research. What were you researching, out of curiosity, that you found my channel? But I jumped all in. I picked Maishan pigs for my pigs. Chris in Alaska, if you don't mind my outing you, Chris Heitzman, just a couple comments above you there, Girly. He has Maishan, I don't know how to say it. I'm not Chinese, so forgive me. He has Maishan pigs, and he has a lot of good things to say about them, and I would imagine a substantial amount of expertise. I know a little bit of them from like secondhand knowledge, but I have not done anything with them yet myself. One of these days I may, though. Would be interesting to hear how your experience, especially as somebody who is new to farming, homesteading, and all that, how you're able to do with them, because you are in the Cheyenne, well, I shouldn't be outing you, but you're in Wyoming. Too late, sorry. You're in Wyoming, big place, love Wyoming, and Wyoming is burly as hell. So if you're able to make those work for you out in Wyoming, then, you know, pretty much, I feel like you can get the worst of all 4 seasons out there, depending on what is going on. I know there's that chick homesteading, no, not Homestead the Hard Way. That's an old dude. Was it Old Fashioned on Purpose or something like that? Jill Winger, I think is her name. I forget the name of her company, her podcast. I think it's Old Fashioned on Purpose. And I used to listen to her podcast, and then she kind of got a little bit, well, whatever. I won't go into that. Doesn't matter what I think. On a personal level, some of her like political and religious views that I thought were a little, just not what I was expecting. But anyways, her stuff is kind of out of my realm of, it's not, there's not a direct overlap in the content. That's why I don't watch the content, not just because I have a, you know, disagreement with her, because I watch a lot of people's content that I may disagree with. But anyways, she's out there somewhere in central Wyoming as well, doing mostly beef and, you know, ranching and stuff. And that's a hell of an environment to be raising animals in. That's hard. Fear Not says, so we have some pretty large commercial barns around us. I've thought about taking a drone and doing supply buys on commercial hogs or supply buys. Basically doing a look at how commercial hogs are raised, maybe even some feedlots, and saying, this is why we cannot sell at the same price. Why are you also getting a better, basically to do some more robust marketing and education. And I 100% agree with that. One of the reasons why I do what I do here on YouTube, actually, I think the video that a lot of you may have found me through is my USDA, like why the USDA sucks and how they make life miserable and make it so that farmers can't make money. Basically a video where a chap wrote me an email and he said, hey, look, you know, I really care about the quality of my food. It looks like you raise your animals well. Is the slaughter any better than the way that you raise them? And I said, bingo, you get a gold star. You are asking exactly the right question about the slaughter, because most people don't really differentiate the two. And even though I raise my pigs with all the comforts and the tummy rubs and the love and the care and the integrity of the system that we try to put behind them, when you are selling USDA, you don't have the option of giving them the closure to the chapter that you would like, that mirrors the ethical rigor that you put into their lifespan, but rather you just send them off on a truck and hope that, you know, they get a good group of workers who are going to take their job seriously. And answering that question and explaining to that guy, and then he asked that question, then he was like, P.S. can I buy just a pound of bacon? I really want to sample it before I buy a whole hog. And I was like, oh man, I got to do a video and respond to this. And I did. And haven't heard from the guy since. Although, I mean, I understand that this pork is expensive, and, you know, there's a lot of other good producers around me. So I'm totally not salty about that. I just think it's funny. But that video blew up, and that was like in last June. And a lot of people, I got maybe 300-400 subscribers off of that video. It's still getting, it's like somewhere around 21,000 views, something like that. And it still, you know, has some traction. And, you know, it occurs to me that making these videos and being active, for me, YouTube is the way that I choose to do this. But there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. But your role as a farmer is not just producing animals or producing crops or vegetables or whatever. It is also education. Like, you have to be able to educate people. And that's one of the reasons why, and maybe someday I'll kind of specialize in the marketing side of farming to try to help farmers, because that's the biggest area where most farmers, number one, don't have the spare time to do it, because it's, most of us are either working our face off on the farm to try to make the farm produce standalone income, or they are working an off the farm job to provide enough cash flow to maintain the farm that they're trying to grow and get to that point where it can provide all of the income. And so when you talk to them and you're like, hey, what have you done in terms of a website, web presence, domain purchasing, search engine optimization, social media, they're like, what? No, I'm way too busy. I don't have time for that greasy kid stuff. And fair enough. Like, I get that. But the job of a farmer in this day and age is education as much as it is production, because the better job you do educating people, the better opportunity you're going to have to produce stuff that gets in the hands of the right people. Which I accidentally just summarized the video that I made about the Idaho pasture pigs for the gentleman out in Minnesota who was asking about it. It's like you have to educate and find the right, you have to match the right product to the right customers. And if there's a mismatch, it's going to be too expensive for them. They're going to be too cheap for you. You're both going to be disappointed. But if you can educate people enough, and educating means educate them on why they're not going to want to buy your product, because yeah, it's not cheap. And so that you get rid of those folks so you don't have to deal with them, so that you can get on to dealing with people who are looking for the product that you're selling. And then it's better for everybody in the long run, and you can market the product at the price that is actually going to be profitable for you, so that, you're not just pissing your time away, but that you actually have the opportunity to make good on some of that investment of time and that labor that you put in, and you can build a business that's actually going to grow with you, not that it's just kind of a joke and a hobby that you're doing, but it actually can be something. So yeah, I'm all for that. Fear not. Definitely do that research, make that educational stuff. The one thing I would say, and this is just kind of a personal opinion with that, because I see a lot of small farms in my area that do marketing that's very like trying to punch, well, I guess technically it would be punching up at the evil big commercial feedlot type of operations. And I think that you got to find the right balance. This is just a personal nuance of marketing. You got to find the right balance where you're presenting the information, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't sound like self-righteous kind of, or smug, but where what you're saying is just like, here's what they do, here's what we do, and you try to keep it as dry as possible and just put the raw facts out there and let customers make up their own minds. It's a very delicate balance, because there are some farms that I feel like it's like their marketing material is like, well, at least we're not like these evil corporations that are poisoning you with everything. And it's like, dude, come on. Like, I understand that the feedlot pork, that is not the optimal type of pork, but they're feeding a shit ton of people and really cheap. And so, yeah, you get what you pay for. That is the reality of it. But like, the people that go to work there, they're not kicking the pigs as they walk by and like giving them the finger and they turn around and like, torturing them and dropping arsenic into their bowl and stuff like that. Like, that's not what they're doing. They're making the cheapest, they're selling a commodity product. And I was actually talking to one of my good friends, my childhood best friend for like all of my life, pretty much. He's talking to me about getting involved in some livestock ventures with a friend of his who owns a sort of defunct dairy farm, and he's debating like maybe getting some cows going on it. And so my buddy is talking to me like, this guy, he's saying like, this guy wants me to invest with him and work with him to get the farm going again. What do you think? And he was kind of picking my brain on kind of the role that pigs might play in a beef operation, because they got like 150 acres, and so they got a little elbow room. And I was trying to explain to it, because his idea was, I'm going to raise pigs and then just send them to auction, because I don't want to have to deal with the direct-to-consumer BS. It's going to be too much nonsense. I don't want to have to deal with that. It's just like, raise the pigs, put them on a trailer, and see what we can get at the auction barn. And it's like, dude, if you're raising a premium product, you can't sell it at a commodity like markup, because then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you're going to only make, you know, a couple of dollars ahead in terms of the money that's coming out, you have to have a whole lot of animals to make the math so that you're actually making any money on it. You got to operate at scale then in order to make any money. If you're selling a product that is better because it is done differently, then your pricing has to reflect that so that you can actually make money, so that you can actually survive. Anyways, I forget how I got onto that topic, but that's just, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got onto that. But just like not being, and I'm not trying to say this like to at you. I'm saying this just from what I've noticed. Just be careful, because like it's real easy when you're doing the contrast and compare, like we're not like the evil corporations, to sound like pretentious, I guess is the thing. And I know, and there's people that I know that I'm friends with that I've looked at some of their marketing when I see it pop up on Facebook, and I'm just like, oh man, that's like, I get it, because it's difficult to present that nuance to people, but it's important to do it in a way that actually washes and makes sense. Because there's some people, when they say like antibiotic free, I think about that and I'm like, shit, if I need antibiotics, I hope you're going to give me some antibiotics. If my pigs are sick, hell yeah, I'm going to give them antibiotics. I'm not going to deprive my animals of decent medical care because, you know, some hippie from Vermont doesn't feel comfortable eating animals that have had any kind of medication, and they would just leave the animal to suffer and die. Like, the hell with that, right? So there's a balance to things. And, you know, obviously what people are referring to is subtherapeutic antibiotics, where there's no medical necessity for there's no medical necessity for the antibiotics. They're just taking them to basically increase the rate of growth and also make them more resilient against bad living conditions. So you can take animals that are getting antibiotics, they're going to grow faster, and they're going to be resistant to the, you know, consequences of animals that are just jammed up. And it's a bad, you know, that's not good. But I guess it's important to be a little nuanced in the way that you present that, so that you can do it where people understand that they're getting real talk. And maybe people don't care, and maybe the pretentious marketing does work. And that's part of the reason why I don't sell that many pigs, is because I try to be a little bit more of a stickler about it. But like, I think about things from my own standpoint, and I think, like, if I saw that, would I cringe or would I buy? And a lot of times I see some of the marketing around some of the small farms, and it's like, none of this, none of that, none of the other thing. We don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do that. And it's like, okay, what do you do? Like, just like, you should be able to sell your product by, like, your product should be good enough that it speaks for itself. Obviously, the marketing has to get the foot in the door to get people to come and try it. And then once they try it, then you have the, you know, the product speaking for itself. But yeah, I'm being difficult about this, but just kind of venting a little bit about small farm marketing. Good evening, Mr. Lightfoot. Good to see you here. I was thinking about you earlier. I was like, I hope I didn't say the wrong thing in my political rantings there, and then, you know, hell, then there goes like a third of my membership, you know, and just in one person flaking off. So I'm glad we haven't completely alienated you there. I'm glad to see you here. Going back up in the chat a little bit, sorry, lengthy rants, that's going to happen. Fear Not says, here's something you should look into, is feeding your farm from your farm. I know you don't like chickens, but they do produce a lot of lysine. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, like basically that was kind of my idea with the chickens, was the eggs feed the pigs, and then the chickens clean up after the pigs. And then also I had some goats. The idea being, of course, that the goats kind of help clear out some stuff, and then the milk from the goats can go to the pigs. So I see what you're saying, and I'm not closed to it. Someday, if my neighbor ever moves, if they raise the taxes again, he's going to have to move, because he's like, I can feel his blood pressure going up just from being next door. He does not like I mean, well, I don't like the taxes either, but I'm kind of stuck here for the time being. But yeah, I just want to be lazy with the chickens and just put the chickens out there. I don't want to have to build a whole containment system and a coop and then the heat and the water and like a whole thing. Like, but eventually, yeah, I can see the benefits of having the chickens and using the eggs to feed the pigs, and one hand kind of washes the other. And with the compost that I have built up at this point, like the chickens could do really well for themselves in terms of their diet just by kind of going through the compost, because they're such filthy animals. They'll just eat whatever is there, and there's a lot of there at this point with everything that comes out of the barn has been sitting on that pile. Wait a second, where are we here? I missed like a whole bunch. Oh, Girly was saying, I'm not exactly sure if we can sell processed out of state, but they can buy here and take it wherever. I know that. Fear Not says, I'll tell you this from my experience. If you want a self-sufficient hog, meaning minimalist in terms of not having to supplement the diet and still be able to provide protein, the Cooney is the champ as far as that. Girly says, yes, Wyoming freedom of food is for Wyoming only, and it does have a lot of things to pay attention to if you get really big. Yeah, that's always kind of the downside with the food laws, is that as long as you're small enough to stay under the radar, that kind of is the thing. But I mean, still, the way I would approach a lot of that stuff is to say, here's what's legal. P.S. Whatever you do with this meat after you're done with it, that's not my business. So, but you could probably do that in a way that does not provoke legal consequences, like making fun of people who eat boneless pork chops. Hey, I'm not responsible for what happens to this meat after you take it off my property. So if you want to, cut the bones out of the pork chops and take them across state lines into Colorado and take them back home there, that's your problem. I have nothing to do with that. As far as I know, you're from Wyoming and you know how to eat a decent pork chop and you leave the bone in. Again, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, but there are ways to kind of use language to get around, like play the word games that they want to play. They want to play the verbal jujitsu. You can play verbal jujitsu with them and kind of get the point across. Girlie says, Maishans have a longer digestive tract, can handle a ton more fiber than most pigs. Interesting, says, fear not. I've grown IPPs a lot, and the complaint is that they are too fatty. I got ahead of this by feeding more fiber than you would to your average pigs, lots of alfalfa. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of making those homestead breeds, whether it's the Maishan or the IPPs or the Coonies or what have you, it's really learning how to feed them in a way that is going to take advantage of their natural ability to convert fiber into protein over time. And I think where this gets really challenging is that when you have mixed groups of pigs, so let's say if I were to throw a couple of Coonies in with my Tamworths and my Berkshires, the problem is that I couldn't have the Coonies in with the Tams and the Berks because I feed them all together. And unless you can separate the more forage intensive animals out of the group and then they get their own food separate from the others, otherwise you're just going to go to the lowest common denominator and call it a day. I mean, it's the same thing even with trying to, reduce the weight on the sows that I have, because I had a couple of sows that were a little on the fat side. And of course, if you follow the channel, if you've subscribed to the channel and you have, paid attention to what we're doing. Oh, you know what? Just occurred to me. Oh yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I'm on the right network here, because I saw my stream rate was struggling a little bit. Trying to get them to lose weight, it's really challenging because whatever you're doing for one, then everybody else kind of winds up getting in on that. So being able to separate everyone out is a big part of that, so that you have enough distinction where you can feed a smaller pig a little bit more freely. If you have a fatter pig that needs to lose weight, you can feed them a little bit less. If you have a Cooney or an IPP pig that requires more greenery and less of the refined grains, that you're able to kind of tailor the diet on an individual level without kind of everything getting all mixed in together. That's a hard thing to do. And I think that if you can kind of isolate, by the breed and the needs, and feed according to the needs based on the breed, sorry for the outlandish rhyme scheme there, I think you have a lot of opportunity to make some improvements. Guys, while I have 15 of you in here watching the stream, please like the stream and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Just want to put my pitch out there since we're rolling right along with this. Let's see. Premium pork on cheap alfalfa. Fear Not says, okay, yeah, we kind of already talked about that. Growing Secret Noise Picture says, Fear Not, you are correct about that. Growing IPPs does take a little bit more finesse, but I will say that the lard is quite valuable. There's a lot of people that will pay really good money for it. Absolutely. Lard is its own income stream. There's definitely a lot of value in that. And this is one of the reasons why I'm actually working on editing a long form video where I'm talking about kind of what I would do differently if I started over. And one of the biggest points, I'll give it away right now, and I've probably said this before, but it's just like, pick one thing and do that thing. I think the biggest enemy of self-sufficient homestead farmers is too much stuff going on. Too many cooks in the kitchen, too many projects on the stove. And what happens is you wind up underperforming on any one thing that could have done really well if it only had captured enough specificity and attention. Being really diligent in the attention that you give to the things that you're doing. Wow, I had 70 concurrent viewers in there for like 1/10 of a second. That's nice. That's what it feels like to be Candace Owens when she hasn't even started her live stream up yet, I guess. Anyways, sorry, I digress. But the point is that pick one thing, don't do a million different things, and that works on a lot of different levels. I think that even with the pigs that you're working with, like if you want to get the best representation of an Idaho pasture pig, you got to go all in on that mentality, on the feeding style, on the pasture management, all of that stuff, and you're like all in. Whereas if you're just doing a couple of IPPs in with the whole group, then it's going to be hard to work with and to really achieve the benefits out of it, as opposed to kind of getting rid of the others and saying we're going to just do this and make this the one thing. And I have experienced the drawbacks and the benefits from that many times, and I'm still trying to relearn that lesson with my pigs, because I got a lot of different breeds and things going on with them, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I like having the variety, and ultimately we're working towards narrowing down and consolidating into the best performers and the best quality of meat and all that stuff, and getting that whittled down. But it takes some time to do that. All right, let's see. Andrew Carter's in the chat, or was. I don't know if he's still there. Yes, Andrew, I will keep the key in the CRV so you can come by tomorrow morning and you can take it for a spin and wake up all the neighbors with the loud muffler. Hopefully the road isn't too muddy, because we got a little bit of snow and that's turned to water, and now everything is soup on my road. Girly says, oh yeah, we just had 109 mile/hour winds on Thursday. We will have well below zeros in temps in the first week. I had my piglets and they're doing great. Awesome. Well, sounds like you got some very good piglets that are off to a good start. Like I said, keep us posted, because a lot of people, for me, like, being perfectly candid, I'm kind of a superficial clown, but for me, the look of the Meishan piglets, like all the face rolls and the jowls and all that stuff. Excuse me one moment, folks. Amelia, sweetheart, that needs to go somewhere else. What's that? Okay, well, sweetie, listen. Amelia, listen. Okay, yeah, I understand that, but what? And now you turn it back on. Can I have it? Don't keep pushing the button because it goes off, and then here, give it to me. Okay, what needs to happen with this is, okay, don't touch any of the buttons. Chris, you were right, and I feel your pain. It's a little bit different. Amelia, sweetie, here. I appreciate you trying to keep quiet, okay? Next time, a different way to approach that would be just to take the whole thing out, and then you can play with, fix it, turn it off in the other room. Yeah, for me, the Maishans were not really, it's not a breed that I was attracted to just because of the aesthetics. I like the look of the Tams. I like the red hogs. And the Berks too, the black and white, you know, same thing with the old spots. A lot of it is, I know it's shallow and superficial, but that's, I got to be who I am, right? I got to be genuine, even if that makes me look like a dingus. Okay, yeah, I got lost in the shuffle here a little bit. I'm just trying to read through the chat. There's a lot going on. I don't know what I'm going to do if I ever actually get like a very robust chat with like 50 people in there that are just like, well, I guess that's when super chats turn into a thing, because the super chats really make it, like, otherwise you get lost. But the visuals with the super chats, that was a smart invention, whoever invented the super chat for YouTube. Like, if you have a lot of stuff going on, like that super chat that highlights it, that makes it stand out. And so it makes it so much easier to like actually keep up with the comments. Girly says, I'm a dog groomer and I have my shop in the barn, and it's hard to figure out the cost of raising my new animals as well as being the bookkeeper and the sole employee. And yes, education is the key. Yeah, well, I'm happy to do what I can. And I think a lot of it with education is you have to kind of keep doing it until you find what works, because different people have different strengths and presentation styles. You know, like you look at the homestead the hard way, homesteading the hard way. I forget what the guy's name is, who I think his name is Chris, but you know, he's able to communicate very effectively through his YouTube videos, and people are drawn to that. Whereas, you know, other people use different strategies that work better, that kind of fit them, and it's the fit that makes the communication really take. And some of that is just practice too. I mean, I always rant and rave to my kids about this, where it's like you have to understand the value of communication, and that's one of the best, potentially, if you're practicing and you're, you know, really trying with what you're doing on a YouTube channel and making videos like this, where you're practicing communication and articulating your ideas so stuff could go from your head to a medium where people can consume it, and you get better at turning those ideas into expressions that people can benefit from. And then when you're in a professional setting, your ability to say things clearly, or maybe more unclearly, but just using bigger words that confuse everybody, you know, whatever, if the shoe fits. But your ability to do that makes other people value your opinion and respect what you're saying and listen to you, take it more seriously. Whereas, and this kind of circles back to the whole marketing thing, you are the most important and the best representative, at least the first line of representation for your brand. And I see we got 14 people in here. So if you haven't, subscribe to the channel, like the stream, and understand that your role as an educator is of paramount importance. Because if you're, like, you know, too busy to take the time to do the marketing, you're going to have a hard time convincing people to pay the extra for the product that you have and to take that risk on your product, when you're not able or willing to put the time into the marketing and the, you know, the stuff that's not the farming. It's like a lot of farming is not actually farming. It's marketing, market research, communication, social media, outreach, and all the little things, the tentacles that come off of the farm that touch other people and that bring people into what you're doing on your farm. That's the stuff that makes the farm farm. So yeah, you got to do that. Fear Not Farm says, yeah, you don't want it to seem like you dye your hair purple. We have a pig auction locally. I watched a friend's video. Gilliam Farms, 40-pound pigs were selling for $40. No money in that. Oof, yeah, then no kidding. Gee whiz, that's, I mean, even if you could, like, well, it's a very different market, but up here, piglets that are 40 pounds, they would fetch, even if they're out-of-state sale barn piglets, they would still fetch a substantial amount greater than, they get a lot more than $40 if they were in New Hampshire, I'll tell you that. Okay, I'm almost caught up with the chat. Here's an idea if you use marketing such as flyers. If you didn't say too much about the product and you link the QR code to a video, people will watch more than they read, 100%. The other thing is, like, I have magnets on the side of my truck. I had one on the back, but that went the way of the buffalo. That's along the side of one of the highways here in New England. But I'm going to redo that, basically so that when people are driving behind me, they can see the brand name. They see the license plate, and so that makes people curious. But they can see the, you know, the QR code on the decals, the magnets, the signs that are on the side of my truck. And so when I'm parked, I'm always advertising. I'm always trying to reach out and start conversations in that way. So, and it does start conversations. Everybody knows better than, like, everybody at the hospital knows better than to say anything or ask anything about pigs, because I'm going to give them an earful because I like to talk about pigs. It's kind of what I do. Fear Not says, I would say this: if I had a steer that required antibiotics in the last 6 to 7 months of his life and it was a real struggle and we're talking several rounds of antibiotics, steroids, etc., I'm not going to sell it for meat. It is going to get taken to the sale barn and will end up in your supermarket. Well, thanks. As somebody who eats meat from the supermarket, well, we're going to have to eat more meat from our farm and maybe sell less of it, because we can't go to the supermarket anymore with the reduction in family income that's happened. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying in terms of the antibiotics. In so far as, like, you want to make sure you're clarifying in other words, like, I also, just to be clear, I would not give antibiotics to a pig and then say, okay, you're walking around good, you're all set, all right, let's put you on the truck and put you in somebody's freezer, you know, a week or two later. Like, for the most part, if I have to give antibiotics, let's say because the pigs are biting each other and they get a staph infection in the tail and they get greasy pig, yeah, I'm going to give them penicillin for a few days. If they get better, presumably they almost always get better with the greasy pig, or if they have, is it tetanus? Is that the one I give penicillin for? I think it's tetanus. Like, when I castrate the pigs, sometimes they drag their ass through the dirt and they get some stuff in the wound. They get tetanus, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to give them penicillin, but then I'm going to grow them out. And after however many months of growing out, I think it's totally appropriate to eat that animal. I would eat it for myself, and I don't think that does anything to reduce the quality of the animal, broadly speaking. Now, if the animal is like a week or two from going to slaughter and I have to give it antibiotics, that situation has never occurred. The only animals that I have, like, and I don't know whether this is just an accident, a happy accident, or whether this means that I'm just, I don't know. You can draw your own conclusions from what I'm about to tell you. But with my feeder pigs, those always just kind of like die on me. It's usually pretty black and white, where they're just like, I come out there and it's like, oh, there's a stiff. And it's almost always purebreds. and it's almost always within the first 2 to 3 weeks of them having come onto the farm. What I have found, at least in my experience so far, is that if they make it past like the first month, I should knock on wood. Like, I don't want to get tested for having said this, because I'm definitely not saying this as a humble brag, but it's just that's the way it's always worked for me, where the ones that wind up coming down with something and getting ill and requiring more antibiotics have almost always been sows that are, you know, and the thing that a lot of them have come down with, seems to be, is the mycoplasma arthritis. But yeah, I mean, I am in agreement about there being a difference in the window of when you're giving those antibiotics in relationship to the point that the person is consuming them, versus if they're, you know, a shoat, you know, small pig, 50, 60 pounds, and they need some antibiotics. Yeah, I'm going to give it to them. Yeah, I'll grow them out. Yeah, I'll sell them. And I'm not selling my pork as antibiotic free. I tell people I treat my animals medically the way I would want to be treated. If I'm suffering, I'm going to give it medication to fix the problem. But I also want to make sure that I'm selling healthy animals to be consumed by my customers, not animals that were like a near miss or like in a gray area. None of that. I'm not selling anything in a gray area. You know, I wouldn't endorse that. Fear Not says, I throw Cooney in with the big ones if I want fat. Coonies are great for free ranging to 50 to 80 pound roasters whole, or to debone and sausage. Interesting. You know, that's a really good idea, because if you were going to do, like, I've thought about specializing in sausage because I love eating sausage. The problem is that a lot of my pigs, I don't get enough sausage, or maybe it's my butcher's fault. I got to talk to him about this. We got to have a conversation about the fat, because I think as a butcher, it's scary to put in as much fat as you actually need to make good textured sausage. You're kind of going out on a limb, because you can't like take the fat back out after you've ground it and mixed it and it's in there. But I think that would be interesting to do certain pigs for fat, or just like do a bunch of lean pigs. Like, let's say, figure out how many Berks that you put in, send them the sausage, like 5 Berks to 1 Cooney, and then the Cooney's sauce or the Cooney's fat gets kind of like distributed throughout. Maybe I'm overthinking this. I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. But when you're talking about sausage, the fat is so important. It is like the underappreciated missing ingredient, because you're really not eating the meat. You're eating the meat, but you're enjoying the fat. And if you take that fat away, like, I don't know if you guys have ever had sausage that's too lean. Oh man, it's so disappointing. Like, literally, this is what the video should have been that I made the last week about the whole thing with Trump. Like, the Trump administration has been like eating pork sausage that has like 2% fat in it. And it's just like, it tastes good and the meat is good, and it's like you want it to actually be the thing, and it is just so disappointing, because you waited forever to get these, you know, sausages back from the animals that you raise, and you know you put a lot into the fat, and there's not enough fat in the mix of the sausage, and it's just like this dry sausage flavored hamburger in a casing, and it's like, yeah, that should have been the motif for the video. Too bad I'm realizing it this late. Anyways, where are we here? Oh, Fear Not is commiserating with the cameo appearance from my daughter and my illustration of how to turn off the toy on my live stream. Yeah, so we have a lot of fun here. You should get some of the red wattles. Yes, I have wanted red wattles. There's a guy in New York who has some really nice, I think Falls View Farm is the name of his farm in New York. Beautiful red wattles, but I don't know how he said, like, I sent him a message on Facebook. I'm like, dude, what do I got to, like, take some reservations for, can I get a couple of breeders from you? and he has some like weird elaborate auction system. And I was just like, okay, I can't. One of these days I'm gonna get some, but I got actually one of my mentors, a gal named Molly from the Copperpenny Farm down in Western Virginia. She was raising red wattles and had a lot of good things to say about them. My understanding is that the red wattles, the basically the again, this is my understanding, so don't shoot the messenger if I'm incorrect about this, but my understanding is there is a lot of old line Duroc genetics in the red wattles. And so what you're really getting is kind of a old line Duroc that's dressed up a little or has some other genetics mixed in, but it's really the old line Duroc genetics that are doing most of the heavy lifting with the red wattles. Haven't tried them myself, would love to. You should get some red wattles. I was almost done with them, but then I just sold some piglets to somebody who is butchering them, and they have had wildly different experiences than mine. Probably just the genetics of the one that I got. Great point. That's something that I'm always bringing up when people are talking about the Berkshires, and it's like, oh, I want purebred Berkshire piglets. And it's like, dude, no, you don't. You want a good F1 cross that has good quality genetics from a Berkshire in there, but you don't want to. Anyways, the point is that within every breed, which is why I always say it's not about the breed that you get, it's about the breeding of the animals that you get and the breeder who's doing the breeding. Because if you get a good breeder who is rigorous in what they're doing and you have good breeding that has gone into your animals and you get a good quality product, then great, everybody's happy. But just having a breed that tends to be good doesn't mean that you're going to get all the best genetics within the multiplicity that exists within that genetic strain. Homesteading the hard way is very smart in certain contexts, but he does not know anything other than what he knows. He comes off very rude about things that he doesn't know. I know it's just ignorance. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that this has something to do with what he says about Idaho pasture pigs. I definitely have heard, and he's not the only one. There's a gentleman that follows or did follow me at one point. I don't know if he still does because I haven't heard anything from him since like the summertime. That's a guy named Porkrine. There's a lot of people that are very, very like they put the hammer down on the Idaho pasture pigs. Although to be fair, I haven't watched a ton of Homesteading the Hard Way. I haven't watched a ton of his videos. I've heard him talk about the Idaho pasture pig and be very derogatory. I've also heard him talk about them and be a lot more conciliatory about, yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. And I would say the position that I heard him articulate most recently about those specific pigs is much closer to my own, although he might be a little bit more sarcastic in the ways that he expresses stuff. Having said that, Dowdle Family Farms, Rob Dowdle, they do mostly Berks, and I think they have some other genetics and some different experiments going on there, but they are way into the pasture stuff and the forage, and just in terms of trying to craft premium pork with excellent quality and excellent, both the genetics and like the whole 9 yards, but with a lot of homesteading. It's like big pork, but with a homesteading ethic that's going into the way that they're raising and breeding them. And they do a fantastic job. And I have learned a ton from that guy about pasture management and kind of managing pigs on pasture, the cover crops that they use, the different mixes, the rotations, and the benefit of certain cover crops and other wastes. Not waste, but like yard waste, and factoring that into the whole mix, as well as building soil. Super, super good info. I would definitely check his channel out. It's one of the few, if not the only, homesteading channel that I currently watch where I still go through and I pull stuff out of his videos. Like, I've watched Justin Rhodes, I've watched Joel Salatin back when I was like kind of getting ready to get ready. Sheraton Park Farms. Watched those back in the day. Just a few acres farm in upstate New York. Love Pete. He's a sweetheart. Got a great looking business. He's got a heart for the animals, and a lot of what he does it mirrors the way that I feel about my animals and kind of the way I'm trying to be and do on my farm. But in terms of just like pound for pound information, Dowdle Family Farms, man, anything with the pasture. And I think I mean, he's raising purebred Berkshires down there in Mississippi, but if he can make it work with the Berks, if it works with a Berk, it'll work with an Idaho pasture pig, because Idaho pasture pigs and coonies, they share a lot of those same genetics anyways, or the red wattle or anything. It's like trying to find what I'm trying to say, I think he does a very good job of providing breed agnostic, pasture-based management systems and strategies to help homesteaders and actual like larger scale pork producers as well. And that's something that is really, really valuable, because it's not based around the hype of any specific breed. And I'll be the first person to tell you, as a pig pork producer or whatnot who raises Berkshires, a lot of it is hype. Like, they make good pork, but I wouldn't say that having Berkshire means that you have like this ungodly, far and away superior product just based on that fact. But he makes good content that helps provide breed agnostic benefits and tips for just pasturing pigs generally, and doing it in a way that actually pays and that makes sense, and at a scale that is actually not just like, you know, Ma and Pa Kettle and their homestead, but it's like he's got a big farm with a lot of property and a lot of pigs, and he's managing them very aggressively, presumably, I think, on a full-time basis. I know he was a pastor, a Baptist preacher at one point, and he might still do that on the weekends, but I think mostly his income is farming there. And to be fair, I mean, his dad was a vet and they had a big farm, and it's not like, you know, he just landed on there and started doing that yesterday. But very, very impressive just resource that I would want you guys to be aware of, and that I'm using, and that I'm going to be doing more experiments with forage, pasture, creating silvopasture, and like hinge cutting a lot of my trees. This is just a little rabbit trail to get you guys interested in, maybe experience with, because I'm assuming, I don't know if ever, like, we have just a ton of trees up in New Hampshire. And so what I'm going to be doing is hinge cutting my trees so that they fall over and we get a little bit more open light on certain areas where there's more dirt, so that I can plant forage crops on that dirt. And then where the trees are tipped over onto the ground, the pigs are going to have access to forage the leaves that are going to continue to grow, because instead of just like felling the tree and just knocking it over and having it laying there disconnected from the stump, it's hinge cut. So it's kind of like a green stick fracture. Like, if you've ever broken a green stick, part of it is still connected. And so it's going to take much longer, probably years, to fully die. And then in the meantime, the top of the tree that's sitting on the ground is going to be accessible to the pigs so they can forage the leaves. And well, we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you posted. Fear Not says, pigs are tough. So far, I haven't had any issues. Try raising goats. Yeah, pigs are so much easier than goats. I hate goats. Again, a lot of that is you're listening to the voice of inexperience talking, and if you do anything the hard way, you're going to not enjoy it, and that's why I feel the way I do about goats. Chris Heitzman says, just a clarification, catching up. I don't have Myshons yet. They are the breed I'm targeting from when I'm able to get pigs. Just have ducks for now, adding chickens this summer, pigs later. Gotcha. Okay, so, well, commiseration and collaboration maybe can happen, because there's some similarities between what you got going on in Wyoming and what you got going on in Alaska. Obviously, in terms of cold, Alaska is going to be more extreme, but there may be some overlap that you can help each other out there. That's cool. Isaac says, I have a Maishan Hereford Cross gilt pregnant from an IPP boar. Man, you got a lot going on in that pig. That's like the Maury show for pigs, but would be really cool to see how those come out. I would expect that there's enough genetic diversity in there to make a very interesting and probably viable product, both commercially and just for your own personal use. So that's pretty cool. Fear Not says, Coonies are easy money. I raised them almost zero inputs, pulled unregistered crosses for $35. They feed our other critters. I heard that, at least in my area, that purebred coonies are hard to get. And the problem is that people in this area are very prejudiced against coonies and even Idaho pasture pigs. So if you're selling a Idaho pasture cross or a coonie cross, there you're going to get some side eyes from a lot of people. There's, I always see in the Facebook groups, people are like, oh, I have, Idaho pasture pig crosses or coonie crosses, and they're like, $150 a piece, and then 2 weeks later it's like, $120 a piece, then it's like $115 a piece, then it's like, like you see people kind of go through that process because the market is in this area in New England. There's a handful of people that are like way into the lore and the ethos and mythos of the coonies and the IPPs, but there's also a lot of people in this area that are just totally not into that. And it sucks because you see a lot of people with nice looking piglets that look like they're fine that are just getting strung out and hung out to dry, I should say, based on just the breeding of the pigs, because the market is not kind to those particular breeds in this area. So you have to be careful with that. Isaac, okay, yeah, we went through that. Isaac again. Fear Not says that will be interesting. Ain't no one else gonna have that pork. Yeah, well said. Isaac says, yeah, I'm hoping the Maishan Hereford will cover the weaknesses of the IPPs, slow growth and small litters. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Fear Not says, I disagree with the assessment of the red wattle in a different sense. The red wattle currently is influenced by the Duroc only to recover the breed, but it's its own breed originally. Interesting. I did not know that. I like red hogs, so I'm a fan. Hey, Secret Noise Pictures, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. Much appreciated. I love those super chats, and it means a lot to me to see those coming through. Someday we'll look back on these days and smile when super chats were less of a necessity. I really hope that one of these days, as we grow, it's going to be, the super chats are going to become more of a necessity, because I just love having people in here and chiming in. And it's kind of nice. I'm not trying to compare you guys to pigs. Just please understand, I just spend a lot of time with pigs, and so as a result, I see piggish things or pig principles in everything around me. But it's like, how when you go from having like 2 or 3 pigs and like you're kind of part of the gang. I've said this before, but like when you go to like maybe 10 pigs, now you're the manager and you're kind of outside, and they're not like, they're only interested in coming to you for food, but that like you're not part of the herd anymore. And you get to that point, like I like being able to like participate obviously in these conversations, but it's encouraging to me to see you guys doing so much, and just I get to kind of sit and witness the community that's happening. But Secret Noise Picture says, make America farmers again. Yes, sir, that is absolutely our motto and our message. You are doing great. For my first piglets, farm born in a few weeks here in the upside down state. Yes, well, Vermont, I like to make fun of like the liberal hippie women that drive the Subarus around with the coexist bumper stickers and the vegan farts and stuff like that. Like, but Vermont is beautiful, especially in terms of pasture and your ability to actually generate revenue and a quality product that actually makes sense in New Hampshire or I'm sorry, in Vermont on some of the farmland that is up there. Of course, I don't know your particular, section, what you have to work with, but boy, I can tell you there's just some beautiful farmland up there, some beautiful pasture. So, and I appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much. Let me see. I'm getting close to being caught up here. If you're not, says in general, homesteading the hard way, says you're stupid if you don't feed soybeans. I understand his context, but I know how glyphosate moves down the food chain. Interesting. I have not heard that part of the conversation. And full disclosure, I have no compunction about feeding my animals soy. My understanding, and again, I am not necessarily a researcher, but I do talk to some smart people about this stuff, is that basically the hang-ups with the glyphosate and other chemicals, that those chemicals basically do not get hung up in muscle tissue, they get hung up in organ tissue. And so the residual effects of the glyphosate in the muscle tissue is negligible to none, as opposed to organs where it is more possible, it's more of a possibility that it would be more present. Again, that is not my position. That is just what I have heard. And based on that, I am interested, if I can get, let me put it this way, if I can get my pasture management up to speed, I would be interested in dabbling with doing a little gateway coonies or Idaho pasture pigs, play with that a little bit to see what the fuss is all about. And because I don't sell a ton of pork at this point. Most of what I'm doing is for breeding purposes. Selling pork, I do, I don't hate selling pork, but like I like selling piglets because you get batches of them, and it's like you get the piglets and you get a little time with them, and then it's like, oh, you're not as cute anymore, you get bigger, out the door you go, cash the check, stack the paper, whatever, and then it's done. You kind of move on to the next little bit. From an economical standpoint, soy is seems to be wage slave Uranus. That's an interesting name. Fed them caviar and fine wine. Yeah, Isaac, it is nice to talk pigs with other people because there's not a lot of people that can understand this. I subject acquaintances and patients, not as much. When I was on the floor at the hospital as like a floor nurse, I would subject my patients to pig talk. The problem is that some of them, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I do this thing with pigs and I kind of get it off my chest and I talk a little bit about the pigs and it's like I'm done. Then they want to go on and on and on and on, and they want to have like these big involved conversations about like, well, what kind do you have? Well, my uncle used to raise this one and they look like that. No, it was the pink one with the pointy ears, not the floppy ears. You get this whole thing and it's like, dude, I got to give meds to like 4 other people. I got to go. So I was very what's the word I'm looking for? Not prolific. I was not very selective with the people that I would share my involvement with pigs when I was working at the hospital. Now I've weaned it down a little bit, but it sure is nice to do that, to get people. I see I have 20 viewers in here. Guys, like the stream, subscribe to the channel. We're making America farmers again. We have some wonderful people in this community, and it is growing. We want to help you grow your own food and take the food supply chain back, because I don't think that Smithfield Pork and other Chinese billionaires should really own what we're doing. They have enough influence with all the cheap crap that comes into our homes through Amazon and Dollar General, but hell, the food that we eat, come on, we should be able to grow our own, right? Yeah, in terms of the soybean, I don't know, that's interesting. The feed that I am currently feeding I have a higher octane ration that I'm feeding to my sows. Oh hell, 2:37. Jeez, I better wind this up. All right, I'm gonna go for like another 10 minutes, and then we're gonna have to wrap this up. Let's see. Just liking the super chat that Secret Noise Picture sent. Yeah, so I have like a high octane mix that is like a high performance sow feed. I feed them for both gestation purposes to make sure they're getting like a higher dose of lysine as well as micronutrients as they're gestating and then as they're lactating. And then for my pigs that are kind of in the middle or that are not breeders, I have a different mix that I'm feeding them, and that is a low soy. They haven't been able to eliminate soy completely, but there's a lot of oats in it. It's a very European mix, I guess, from what I've been told. So I work with a lady who owns a company called Grow the Earth LLC. You can find her on Instagram. I'm going to do a video with her on this channel because basically her model for pork production, she like enjoys the nuts and bolts of distribution and marketing pork. She has a little bit of land. She grows a couple of pigs herself. She grows some chickens as well, but she wants to do it on a bigger scale. She's got a very good brain. She is a business head. She is either working on or has one or two masters, MBAs, whatever. She's got a lot of brain power and not as much land. And so what she's basically doing is contracting with small farms like mine where, let's say, I want to raise more pigs, but I don't want to raise more pigs if I don't know if I'm going to have buyers. And then you are in that weird undefined gray area where you're unable to know that you have a buyer. So basically what she does is she comes in and says, look, we don't have to have any contracts. There's no minimums. You can raise whatever you want. Let's make a deal for what you're going to raise for me. And if you have extra that you can't sell to your own customers, then you can sell me those too, and I'll take those. So it's basically like a guaranteed buyer. And she's like crowdsourcing the different farms to raise them so that, and she's working on getting a kind of keeping the feed the same and the breeds the same. So I'm kind of like the piglet supplier guy, and I also raise some feeders potentially for her. I have raised a bunch for her in the past, and so she's trying to improve the quality of the product. One of the things that she's doing is a low soy product that she's been developing with the feed company, the feed mill, and they haven't been able to get to zero soy, but they are down to low soy, which does cut into the lysine, so it's a little lower on the lysine. But if you supplement it with, this is the working logic, right? If you feed this low soy feed and then you supplement it with whey, that it gives you enough lysine in the long run, and then you're able to kind of make it work. And it's got a lot more oats and barley in it in terms of the lysine and the protein than it does soy, but there's still a little bit of soy in there. If you're not, or Isaac says, I use organic feed, and so I have no issues using soybean in my meat, so I won't change till there's an issue. The Pasture Pigs podcast is a real deal. Yes, Pasture Pigs podcast is how I met Molly. She was on one of the first episodes, or one of the earlier episodes of the show, and very lively Southern gal, very cool. And she knows a lot about pigs, and her family has been doing a bunch of stuff with pigs for years. So there's a lot of wisdom, pig-wise, baked into the cake there. And she's been a huge, huge help for me in my farm. And yeah, one of these days, maybe she was going to come up here and get some, I hear children screaming. Hopefully they're okay. I don't have to go yell at somebody here in a second. But anyways, yeah, like she was going to come up here and buy some mangalitas from Armstrong Farm up here in northern New Hampshire, but that never worked out. And I was going to try to get her to visit and pop into the podcast. Fear Not says, also he says, he being homesteading the hard way, he says that there's not really a difference in commercial pork and farm raised. I'm sure that's true if you feed them the same, but hogs in the sun have 3 times more vitamin D. Yeah, you know, I have had some of my own, just my own pork. I've had some of my own, and it's all been fed conventional feed. So I'm not saying that the conventional feed is good or bad, or better or worse than. I can't make a qualitative assessment, but what I can tell you is I've always fed generic feed that uses soy and is not anything special. And what I can tell you is that I have made my own pastured pork that is like a different animal. And ironically, the most intense difference in quality, flavor, marbling, all of that stuff, it came from a pink pig, pointy ears, Yorkshire pig, nothing exciting genetically, just could have fallen off a production truck out in Iowa somewhere and wound up in my barn. And this pig just kind of kept him in the woods for a couple of years. Not even a lot of oak trees. I don't think there was anything special forage wise. He was just foraging a lot. And, you know, a decent amount of corn and also just like normal grain rations. I was definitely overfeeding them because they got way too much fat out of those. But man, that meat was fantastic. Now, I've had pasture raised Berkshires that have, like, in the intro clip to my videos, there's a picture of me like holding a roast in my hand and I turn it over. I mean, it's dark, it's marbled, it is great quality, but it's recognizable. Like if I ate that, I would know I'm eating pork. With the pork from like my first couple that I raised up in the woods, if I didn't know, I wouldn't know that that was pork that I was eating. I don't know, super, super dark meat, maybe because they were up and they were doing a ton of foraging and they were up in the woods. I don't have a ton of oak trees up there, so I don't know what they had to dig up and what they were eating, but yeah, it's a head scratcher. Fear Not says to Isaac, organic soybeans would be virtually impossible to find affordably. Homesteading the hard way would say that you're stupid if you spend more than $20 per 100 pounds of feed. I'm trying to do the math because I buy feed by the ton. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a lot of opinions. And at the end of the day, it's like if I was buying, if my marketplace, this is one of the things I think that also that's important to remember is that regional forces and education, and I don't mean that to be a smug elitist D-bag, but like regional everything has a tremendous amount of impact on what you're doing and you're selling. You know, there's a lot of old farmers in my area that think that I mean, the gentleman who lives next door to my house thinks I'm an imbecile because I have these greasy hair, greasy kid stuff, purebred pigs. That's nonsense. Back in my day, we just did it with, pink pigs and white pigs, and that was it. And it's like, if you can't do it with that, then you don't know what you're doing, and you need to just kind of shut them up in a concrete slab and throw some feed at them and go on in 6 months and feed a bunch of bread from the from the store, expired produce, and like save money. And pork schmork, like it's all the same thing. And there's people that think that because a lot of it has to do with their generation, with their market. And my understanding is that a lot of what the homesteading the hard way, and I want to say he's in North Carolina, if it's a stretch to get people to pay $3 a pound hanging weight for your pork, then yeah, I mean, okay. Part of the thing is I don't think that means that that's the only option. I mean, that means that you're kind of aiming at the same target that everybody is selling, which is commodity pork. And you're not really taking seriously the opportunity or the option to sell, instead of commodity pork, premium pork. I wouldn't even say specialty pork. Specialty pork is where it's like, Iberico, and you have all this other, funny stuff that's done with it because it's, hard to acquire, hard to find. But like, it's premium pork. And premium pork is a premium product. It's raised in a different way. It tastes differently. It has different nutritional value. It's worth it for some people. It's not worth it for others. Hey, if we're on the same sheet of music, great. You can be my customer. We're gonna have a great big old time. If you're not the right customer, then hey, that's okay too. Like, I don't think that, I guess what I would say when it comes to kind of like the small farm marketing and all of this stuff, it kind of ties in, is like, I don't think that the, like the feedlot pork, yeah, it's a lesser quality product, but at the end of the day, I think people are going to be better off if they're eating more protein and more fat, even if it's of a lower quality. It's just like I always tell my patients that, like, I'm a diabetes educator professionally, and I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 16 years old. I'm 43 now, no complications, good A1C, all that jazz. I have credibility in that regard, believe it or not, even though I, wear the same clothes every day and look like something that the cat dragged in. But that notwithstanding, that side of my professional expertise, I always tell patients, look, if all you can afford is you go to the store and you get, Slim Jims and pork rinds, you're still going to be better off than if you go to the store and you get Twinkies and Chip Ahoy. You're going to be better with the Slim Jims and the pork rinds. So that there's different gradations of good, and I think that some people also get very attached to the way that they do things. My main lens that I'm filtering through is, if I wouldn't pay that much for it, I can't ask my customers to pay that much for it. And if I am going to make them or ask that much, not make them, but like, if I'm going to offer a product at that price, I have to be able to justify and say it absolutely is worth it. And I would be interested in doing some side-by-side, taste comparisons, and to really see what to get nerdy on some of that stuff and really figure out what the actual difference is between, what the actual difference is between the soy versus the not soy. There's arguments for it and against it, but for me, a lot of it comes down to, if I see the need to change what I'm doing, I'm happy to do it. I'm also curious to see what the low soy option, because you might be able to get some of the benefits of the soy, but have a lot of the volume that's going to actually affect the fat deposition and the flavor that is stored in with the fat without having the soy. And so you kind of have the ability to, in the same way that they say bacon is unhealthy, because when you fry bacon and you make it crispy, if you fry it the wrong way, it's sensitive to, cancer-causing molecules that form in the fat when it's fried and it's crispy. So it's like, okay, could you get some of that and take that on the chin, and it's not going to hurt you, without, can you split the difference, basically? That's kind of what I'm suggesting. And I suspect that the truth, or the best product, is somewhere in the middle. Wage slave Uranus, technically. Do the pigs like music, or don't they care? Great question. I generally try to go easy on the music when the pigs are around, because the last thing I want to do is get them really wound up. When I'm playing music for the pigs, it's usually something relatively calm. Like, I'll play a little classical music. I'll play some Bach for them. Like Handel's Messiah, I like to listen to sometimes in the barn. Also, like country music, bluegrass. They don't seem to respond differently to different music. If I had more of a personal relationship with my pigs, like I did when it was a smaller herd, I might have a better answer for you, but that's all I got at this point. Fear Not says, I do agree with your assessment. It would make more sense if most of those things were deposited in their livers, kidneys, etc. Since you're a diabetes medical professional, what's your thoughts on carnivore majority diet? Yeah, let me talk about the carnivore diet for a second. Maybe I'll do a podcast or a live stream about that, because I could go on about that. Basically, carnivore diet, I would say I endorse like 95%. I think that for some people, depending on their metabolic health and if they have other conditions that affect their hormones, like hypothyroidism or other medical conditions like problems with their lungs that force them to be on steroids. So they have steroid-induced hyperglycemia, SIGH, which is just a travesty. Unfortunately, it's really sad because I have patients that have a decent A1C and that work really hard, and they just can't get out of their own way because the steroids, they're on long-term steroids, and that just F's up your hormones, and the blood sugar is part of that. It's just, you know, the tail goes with the hide, and it's really unfortunate. Generally speaking, I would argue that higher protein is going to be better for almost everybody. There are exceptions to the rule, but all of the things being equal, if you eat a higher protein diet, I like carnivore because the more basic the form of protein, the better it's going to be. And there's less opportunities to throw other things in the mix. So, but a lot of times I have older folks and people that, you know, economic issues strain at their ability to afford protein. So it's like tuna salad, egg salad, chicken salad, get a rotisserie chicken at the grocery store, eat the chicken, and then you have the carcass. You strip down the carcass, make chicken salad out of that. Then whatever's left on the bone still, you boil that, make chicken soup, and you could throw a little bit of bacon, some mushrooms, onions in that, and you boil that, throw a little butter in on top of that, then you get a good soup that'll stick to your ribs, has a lot of fat, moderate amount of meat. From a diabetes standpoint, I guess, in answer to your question, and I'll try to wrap this up, otherwise I'm going to go on all night about this, but I think that the diet that is better from a diabetes standpoint is a fat heavier diet. So to your question, really the Idaho pasture pigs and the Kune Kunes would be better for me feeding myself. A ketogenic diet is going to be better. Now, you can eat a carnivore diet that is also ketogenic, meaning that it generates ketones. The thing is, you have to portion out your macronutrients such that you are eating vastly more fat and not too much protein, because when you eat protein, you think of it as being, oh, it's like no carbs. True, but when you eat a bunch of protein, your liver is going to, through the process of gluconeogenesis, big words, just to show my credibility there, the gluconeogenesis that happens in the liver turns the protein that you eat into sugar. And so your brain can only run on sugar, your body can run on ketones, and so your brain relies on the liver producing some sugar, even if you're not eating any carbohydrates. And so that protein that you consume gets turned into sugar. Your brain can use that and survive without any issues. But what can happen is if you eat too much protein and not enough fat, the too much protein raises blood sugar, raises insulin, throws off the ketone production, and kind of makes it harder to stay adherent to that type of diet, because as your insulin spikes, because of the, not spikes, but as your insulin levels are higher, it makes it harder to stay consistent on a carnivore diet. But you can eat a carnivore diet with fatty meat. That would be my recommendation. And honestly, one of the things I'm going to do one of these times is actually do like a self-experiment where I eat nothing but my own pork, and maybe do that with a Kune or an IPP that produces exactly the right kind of macro profile that I could get by with eating that stuff, and it would put me right where I want to be nutritionally speaking and blood sugar wise. I think a high carnivore version of a ketogenic diet is really, really good. I think that's what humans were made to eat, were designed to eat. The other thing that I've been doing a lot of is just doing a, well, I don't have my sardines on me right now, but like a sardine diet where it's portable, it's easy, it's high fat, got moderate protein, and that's, oh, and I'm trying to check my blood sugar on my phone, and my phone has decided to update. Thank you, phone. Now, well, I can tell my sugar's a little bit low, but yeah, I'm super interested to talk about the nutritional stuff, and I think at some point maybe I'll maybe make some content and start focusing on some of that stuff in the live streams and other stuff to kind of connect the dots a little bit. Fear Not says, I feed them Milo, peanut meal, oats mixed with Fertrals, the mineral mix, and lysine added, $24, $100. How does that compare to y'all's commodity? I don't know what it is, 100. I know my feed is like 520, at least at last time that I bought feed. It was like 520 a ton. I don't know how that translates. Fear Not says, best pork I ever had was just commercial hogs, pointy ear white pigs, come out of a commercial operation, but I fed them on watermelon and corn chops. Maybe that's the secret. We've all been wrong all this time with all the pasture-based stuff and, you know, the Berkshires and all these F1 crosses and all this witchcraft to try to create better pigs. The answer is really just production hogs, but fed better and put outside so they can forage a little bit. Hey, you know, nature versus nurture, but there's something to it. I fed them after they were around 150 pounds. Interesting. Chris Heitzman says, my feed prices are heavily skewed, even if I knew them offhand. Our duck feed is close to $35 for a 40-pound increment of feed, which is why I'm looking at more pasture-based animals and breeds. I've seen people using, I guess they call it duckweed, because you can feed chickens and ducks off of that. I don't know if that's viable because I think it requires hydroponics, which could turn into its own project. One of the things, speaking of side projects, one of the things that I've been thinking about doing is growing sprouts. Like, I've heard some pasture-based gurus talking about growing sprouts in like trays, and you just grow bean sprouts basically and throw a bunch of that to the pigs every day. Haven't tried that. Seems like a pain in the ass. Maybe it's not that bad. Would be cool to do that just to add some fresh greenery to the pig's diet, especially during the winter, because hay will only go so far, obviously, and being able to put some fresh greens into their mix, I think, would be interesting and useful. Fear Not says, that's expensive. Start shopping. Chris says, I'm also in Alaska, literally at the end of the supply chain. Like, literally, yeah, you're not kidding. Everything in Alaska is so expensive. Although, I guess now, to kind of bring things full circle with World War III, we're all going to be paying Alaska prices like Alaska from a couple of months ago, but still, we're going to be getting the feel of that. I hate to think of what you're going to be paying up in Alaska as the bottom falls out of the system. That's just nuts. Okay, wrapping it up. I'm almost caught up. Moose and salmon. Oh man, did I miss one? Chris said, oh, okay. We got a couple of things. Man, I was further behind than I realized. Chris says, my only other option would be bulk order by the ton and have it shipped up from the lower 48 and bypass all stores. Damn, that would be expensive. Although, I mean, hell, if you knew the supplier, you could probably even rent the truck. It might be, no. Don't listen to that. My ideas are dumb. I don't have any good ideas for getting around the shipping costs. Isaac says, I'm in Schoharie County, New York, so hoping to find some customers in Catskills for organic pasture raised pork. Yeah, I mean, if you can pitch to like bed and breakfasts and even look at some, what do they call my sugar's low, I'm having a brain fart. You know, the thing where you rent the room for the night and it's Airbnb, Verbo, that kind of thing. Like, talk to some of those purveyors. They get people coming up from New York. You'd be surprised. And even some restaurants and stuff like that. Look at trying to pitch some of your products to them because it would be worth it for them. Obviously, you're going to need a USDA, all that nonsense. But there's some tourism in the Catskills, especially certain times of the year. Yeah. Schoharie County is beautiful. Also, just like towns and colleges and like any areas where people hang out that, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this, but like there's kind of the yuppies are at. And hell, even if you go to like Albany or have to go a little bit further, like if you can tell a good story with your marketing for your product, those people are going to want it, because they don't just want the pork. They're not buying the steak, they're buying the sizzle. They want a good story to be able to tell that goes along with, you know, they want a good story. And if you have a good story, they'll pay for it. Chris says, I also don't have enough animals yet to make it worth that level of commitment. That makes a lot of sense. Fear Not says, maybe instead of ducks, I'd look at your rabbits, pasture-based animals that would cost exponentially more with long winters. I'd be eyeing caribou and moose and salmon to fill freezers up there. Chris says, rabbit feed is equally expensive. There are also some bacterial injections here that make pasture raising rabbits difficult because the bacteria can be passed on up to the people. What's my sugar?
In the 40s.
Ah, shit. Yeah, I'll take that. Thanks, babe. I can tell. That's what happens. I talk too much. Thank you to my wife, who is monitoring my blood sugar from afar and brought me the elixir of life, the Yoo-hoo, which I love Yoo-hoo. And when I drink this, it's like I can feel my brain like reinflate. It's wonderful. Turns out this is not carnivore. I'm not sponsored by this company. I don't endorse any of their products or their beliefs, their manufacturing philosophies. But when my sugar is in the 40s, I would rather, you know, have a little Yoo-hoo than have a seizure on camera. You know, not great for the algorithm, I don't think. Oh, maybe it would be. I don't know. Like, tune into this live stream as I have a seizure on on camera. You can watch me chew on my tongue and twitch. I can, you know, whatever. All right. Moose and salmon are nice. Yes, they are. I have eaten my share of Alaskan moose, and they taste amazing if they're cooked right. Moose and salmon are nice with 6 to 10 hour one-way drive for salmon. Moose is questionable each year. Most people are averaging moose every 3 or 4 years. They're a very low density animal. That is a very good point. You know, I have not thought of it that way. I know when I lived in Alaska, they used to go dip netting at the Copper River, and we would fill a lot of freezers with a lot of salmon. But it's you got to have the time and I mean, 5-6 hours. That's a big ride. That's like a once a year thing. Very little heifer in studying the different vegetation. Go a long way with rabbits. Chris is looking at goats and sheep, primarily with pigs as secondary, and then tertiary birds. More they can eat, what will grow here, and then hay being the cheapest fees in the winter. I don't know if you have any local hay suppliers, Chris. That might be something to look at. I know where I was living near Delta Junction, we made a lot of hay, and we used that to kind of support what we were doing with the animals, with the cows and whatnot. And we were feeding pigs too. I think they fed pigs a lot of the dairy, as well as hay. Cows here are questionable, as it would cost $4,000 more to feed a cow through 2 winters due to being below the lower critical threshold temp for 4 months of the year. One issue with rabbits here is water. They're very labor intensive depending on how you choose to raise them. The freezing water constantly, it's a lot of bottles trying to thaw out 2-3 times a day. More rabbits expands the problem. Damn, that's hard. You're not selling the Alaska thing, Chris. I don't want to move there anymore. If You're Not Farm says, you sound just about like Ken Berry, talking about my nutritional stuff, presumably. I'll tell you this, it's interesting how I know more about ruminant animal metabolic functions than I do my own. Yeah, I'm a farmer. I hear you. Yeah, it's one of the things that I feel like is incredibly sad is like looking at farmers that, like you say, they put so much knowledge and passion and attention into feeding the animals, and they would never feed their animals trash, but they go to Jiffy Mart and Dollar General and they stack their own bodies full of absolute nonsense that, you see them in the hospital and they don't have time or resources to take care of themselves because they're busy doing the Lord's work, and that's tough. Fear Not Farm says, look into fodder for greens. Yes, that's what I was trying to, bean sprouts, fodder. That's the thing I was thinking about. Yeah, I'm interested in learning a little bit more about fodder. Chris says the main problem with hay still being the cheapest is horse people pay premium for hay, and I'm assuming that drives up the prices. Yeah. Well, 62% of people said they would join a Facebook group if I start one, so maybe I'll start one. I gotta look and see how many votes I got on that. Alaska also has advantages like not having the political issues and economic self-deletion of Washington State. Yeah, there's some truth to that. 13 votes, 62. What's 6? So 62% of 13 people would join a Facebook group. That's enough for me. I have a low enough threshold. I'll start a Facebook group and see. I'll put that out. I'll make like a video at some point, or maybe once I get that done, my next live stream, I'll give you guys the info and I'll put it in the description. But yeah, and if you're watching this later and you've made it through 3 hours and 9 minutes of my blathering, yeah, by all means, let me know in the comments if you would be interested in a Facebook group in the comments so we know. All right, guys, it's been 3 hours and 9 minutes. I'm going to trim off probably the first 9 minutes, but I've really enjoyed this live stream. Secret Noise, I appreciate you hitting me up with that generous super chat every little bit that you guys do. Of course, we do have memberships open, so if you guys want to support the channel, become a member. You get a nice bright green thing on your little label on your name. Would love to have more members so that we can start doing things specific to the members. Right now we have 3, and one of my members is my wife, so that the quality of what we're doing here is really good, because if I can get my wife on board and she just downsized her job, so she's still a member, although hopefully she doesn't cancel her membership. But anyways, yeah, I'm kind of messing around with you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come and participate in this live stream. If you haven't already liked the stream, please do that on your way out and subscribe, because we're going to have more live streams like this. And as we kind of pivot the direction that our home is going with one less off-farm income source, we're going to be doubling down on trying to expand what we're doing, the offerings that we have going on here in terms of more content, the content that we can monetize, including the the PDFs and the videos and all that stuff. We got a lot that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be expanding that part of things here, because I'm excited. I think this is, I think it's a choice I would leave you with this idea that, the world is burning down around our ears. Our hope has never realistically been in politicians. My personal hope and faith is in Jesus Christ, and that may or may not ring a bell for any of you guys, but that's where I'm coming from. And at the end of the day, I don't trust politicians to be the answer to what it is that I am trying to do. Politicians are neither here nor there. They're going to be in the way, or they may be accidentally helpful, but at the end of the day, it's up to us to do the best we can with the opportunity and the resources that we are given. And so that's what I am going to be doing and continuing to do here as we try to make America farmers again and get back on top of things. And I'm excited about the fact that the challenges that we face, they also represent opportunities. Nothing is one-dimensional. So the things that we are concerned about, it's going to teach us things that we need to know. The things that where prices are going up and where the system is failing, that's going to create opportunities for us to have our attention on making America farmers again, literally, and putting that out there to other people who are not farmers, but providing them education using the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in as a nation as an outreach tool to bring more people into the communities that we're building, the businesses that we're building, the profitability that we're creating, and the sustenance that we're able to provide, hopefully for our families, and also out there to the public to make more people aware of what they've been missing, because everybody needs this. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Hope you guys are good. Appreciate your time. Oh, we got 14 votes. Looks like we got another vote for it. Yeah. So anyways, guys, on that note, I wish you all a good night, and thank you guys for coming out. We'll see you on the next one.